Chapter 839. After the slaughter, the mystical silver fox did not take the initiative to find trouble with the Japanese cultivation world. Instead, in front of the Japanese cultivation world, she continued to swagger through the thunderclouds. It seemed that she was still not satisfied with her current spiritual energy situation, so she was constantly absorbing the power of heaven. When the Japanese cultivation world saw this, they were all frightened, but there was no better way. They could only pray that the masters of all sects in the Japanese cultivation world would gather soon. In addition, they prayed that Abe Naomi and Tachibana Wakako could persuade the Chinese cultivation world to send people to support them. The Japanese cultivation world had a very subtle feeling about the Chinese cultivation world. Most of the monk soldiers of Shintoism and Pure Land True sect held a contemptuous attitude. The former was because although Shintoism itself was a native religion of Japan, for thousands of years, Chinese culture had spread to Japan. Shintoism combined Chinese Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. It could be said that the three religions were combined into one, and combined with Japan's own characteristics, it formed a unique religion. Since the Ming dynasty, Japan had gradually sought to get rid of the influence of Chinese culture. After the Meiji Restoration, it had announced that it would leave Asia and enter Europe, completely disregarding China as its big brother. As a mainstream religion, Shintoism had set off a vigorous de-China movement. If they wanted to get rid of the cultural influence of a nation, they must first tamper with history and despise the other party. As for the monk soldiers of the Pure Land True sect, because of the many battles with the Chinese cultivation world in the past 100 years, they thought that most of the Chinese cultivators were cowards. When they went to the sect, basically all the top masters were in seclusion, and most of those who dared to challenge them could not defeat them. This made them develop a strong contempt for the dialogue. But at the same time, there were also a group of people in Shintoism and Buddhism who were close to and identified with China. This group of people came to China almost every year to find their roots and ancestors, to worship and burn incense. They thought that the Chinese and Japanese cultivation worlds were separated by a strip of water. No matter how deep the grudges were in the past, the cultures of the two countries were too close to be separated from each other. In particular, most of the Buddhist cultivators regarded China as the country where their Dharma originated, and most of them respected and affirmed the cultivation sects of Chinese Buddhism. Tachibana Wakako was a comprehensive product of Shintoism and Buddhism. She was a cultivator in Shintoism, but she grew up at the foot of Mount Koya. In the past, under the guidance of her master, she thought that there were no masters in the Chinese cultivation world, so she couldn't help but look down on them. However, after the Taoist assembly, Tachibana Wakako was scared to tears by Li Yundong's slap. After going back, she met her mother, Tsuruko Tachibana, who enlightened her. Only then did she respect the Chinese cultivation world. It turned out that there were experts in the Chinese cultivation world and there was more than one. It turned out that not only was Li Yundong a great master, but Wang Yuanshan was also so strong in the past. Although Tachibana Wakako was young, she was considered precocious. She knew how heavy the burden on her shoulders was this time, so she didn't dare to neglect it. With awe and uneasiness in her heart, she set foot on the journey. In particular, after her mother, Masako Tachibana, was defeated by Li Yundong, she couldn't recover from the setback. She automatically gave up the position of the patriarch of the Tachibana family and returned the position to her mother, Tsuruko Tachibana. Tsuruko Tachibana was a typical pro-China party, so she naturally brought Tachibana Wakako, who she valued very much, to the pro-China party. But no matter how pro-China Tachibana Wakako was, she wouldn't show it too much, because Abe Nakian of the Abe family was with her. In terms of status, Abe Nakian was not inferior to her at all. In terms of age, he was older than her. Moreover, Japan had a social structure where men were superior to women. Women had a low status and were the vassals of men. Although the Tachibana family had always been famous for its strength in the cultivation world, Tachibana Wakako was young after all. After leaving the country, she subconsciously respected Abe Nakian everywhere and let him make the decision. She only followed closely beside him. Abe Nakian had just lost his father. If it were another young man, he would have been so decadent that he would have been crying all day long. However, his eyes were red all day long and his face was calm. His eyes were full of determination and hatred. He was not like Tachibana Wakako, who had come to China and seen the top masters in the Chinese cultivation world. She had even fought with the reincarnated Wisdom King and knew his power and horror. In Abe Nakian's view, the young man, who was only a few years older than him, might not be as powerful as the legend said. However, Issei Shunlight and Kaisai Hikaryoshi had repeatedly told him to invite Li Yundong, so he came doubtfully. This time, Abe Nakian and Tachibana Wakako went to China in a low-key manner. Both of them wore ordinary clothes. The man did not wear a robe with wide sleeves and a long skirt, nor did he wear a bone-like robe. The woman did not wear a beautiful kimono. The two of them looked no different from Chinese people. The cultivation world of Japan was very powerful. Before, many Japanese had come to Tianan City to pay homage to the Desanxian. Naturally, it was impossible for them not to find out where Li Yundong was staying. After the two of them arrived at Tianan City, it was still raining and thundering. Abe Naoko and Tachibana Wakako followed the map and found Li Yundong's home. After knocking on the door twice, someone quickly opened the door. Abe Nakian was a yin-yang master. He had opened the yin-yang eyes since he was a child. He was extremely sensitive to demons, ghosts, gods and demons. He could recognize the real body of demons and ghosts at a glance. At a glance, he saw that the person who opened the door was a fox. This time he was really angry from the bottom of his heart and he was full of courage. Abe Nakian's father had been killed by the mystical silver fox. He hated the house and the crow, so naturally he hated all the foxes. At this time he found a fox in Li Yundong's house. He was really like an enemy meeting. His eyes were extremely red and he was shocked and angry. He subconsciously cursed, "Fuck, give me your life." After that, he took out a 5-pointed star talisman and slapped it at Lingyu, who was opening the door. Lingyu was shocked and immediately screamed. As soon as she shouted, she quickly covered her mouth. At this time the others in the living room also rushed out one after another, and without saying a word they went straight to Abe Nakian. Tachibana Wakako was even more shocked. She quickly grabbed Abe Nakian and shouted with all her might, "Mr. Nakian, calm down. They are Li Yundong's disciples." Although Abe Naoto was older than Tachibana Wakako, his cultivation was not as high as hers. When she stopped him he couldn't release the talisman. He just struggled like crazy, roared like a wild beast and shouted unpleasant words in his mouth. Fortunately, the foxes who rushed out at this time could not understand Japanese, so they did not know what he was saying. At this time Chao Yi, Lu Yuehong and the others were not there. Only Lin Miao was there. Lin Miao knew that he had only been in the door for a short time and had no right to speak, so he just stood by quietly. At this time the door suddenly opened. Ruan Hongling rushed out of the door, frowned and shouted in a low voice, "What's the noise? Don't you know that someone is going through thunder retribution?" Se Xingguang had calculated everything, but he had not expected that Li Yundong and the others were still going through thunder retribution at this time. People who had never gone through thunder retribution would naturally not know how important this period of time was for Chinese cultivators. In his opinion, although Abe Nakian might hate the fox around Li Yundong, he thought that Li Yundong was a broad-minded gentleman, and at the same time, a great cultivator with profound cultivation. Not only would he restrain his subordinates, but he also had enough ability to deter Abe Nakian. But what he didn't expect was that Li Yundong and Su Chan were having a great time transcending the thunder tribulation at this time. The two of them were thousands of miles away, leaving only Ro here, protected by the other members of the Fox Zen sect. Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and the others were also going through thunder retribution. Could be said that they were racing against time. Their young spirits were fighting against the heavenly thunder, so how could they care about these things in the door? Ruan Hongling usually had a close relationship with the little foxes. As soon as she opened her mouth and shouted, the door immediately became quiet. Then both sides closed the door and a group of people blocked the staircase aisle, tightly packed. Ruan Hongling saw Tachibana Wakako and frowned. Her impression of Tachibana Wakako was still at the Taoist assembly. She shouted unhappily, "What are you doing here? Do you want to disturb my Shiji and Li Yundong's thunder retribution?" Since returning from the Taoist assembly, Tachibana Wakako had studied Chinese for a while under the influence of her mother. At this time it was not a problem for her to talk. She quickly pulled Abe, who was in a state of rage, forward, lowered her head and said respectfully, "We want to see Master Li Yundong." Ruan Hongling sneered and said, "What do you want to see him for? Do you want to cry?" Hearing her teasing, Tachibana Wakako blushed and said, We have no malicious intentions this time. If you think that we came suddenly and were rude, please forgive us." As she said this, she knelt down gracefully. Chinese people thought that there was gold under their knees, so kneeling was a very big deal. However, the Japanese people's kneeling was just a common etiquette, and they knelt down as they pleased. The cultural difference between the two sides led to this kneeling. The expressions of Ruan Hongling and the hostile little foxes suddenly eased a lot. Ruan Hongling snorted and said in a softer tone, "You're good at talking. What do you want from Master Li Yundong?" Tachibana Wakako said respectfully, "We have something to say to your master face to face." Ruan Hongling frowned and said, "Didn't you hear what I just said? Is he going through thunder retribution now? Look at my lips, thunder retribution. Do you understand what it means to go through thunder retribution?" Tachibana Wakako raised her head anxiously and said, "But we really have something urgent to do." Before she could finish her words, Abe suddenly shouted and angrily spoke Japanese, "Wakako, get up. This Li Yundong is in cahoots with the fox. Even if he is invited, he must be a helper of the mystical silver fox. We are blind to look for him." Tachibana Wakako looked at him with embarrassment. She immediately wanted to beg again, but Ruan Hongling raised her eyebrows at this time, lowered her voice, gritted her teeth and said angrily, "What are you arguing about? Do you want to fight?" Well, come on little devil, how dare you be so arrogant here? Have you eaten arsenic? Are you tired of living?" Abe could understand Chinese but he could not speak it well. At this time in a hurry he naturally used his mother tongue. When he heard Ruan Hongling's words he became more and more furious. If it weren't for Tachibana Wakako holding him tightly, he would have already fought. At this time, Tachibana Wakako couldn't help but pull him and say loudly, "Mr. Abe, you can't let yourself do it. Do you want to harm the entire Japanese cultivation world?" Abe felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and he suddenly froze on the spot. His eyes were red and he glared at Tachibana Wakako angrily. He gritted his teeth and said, "Tell them the words and see if they want to help. If they don't mean it, it's useless even if you kneel through the floor." Tachibana Wakako had no choice but to turn her head and tell Ruan Hongling what she had come for. Ruan Hongling and the little foxes next to her were all shocked. "What? The mystical silver fox has been resurrected?" As the little foxes of the Fox Zen sect, when they heard that the greatest figure in their sect had been resurrected, they naturally felt refreshed. They didn't think that it was a bad thing at all. They were all overjoyed, which only made Abe, who was next to them, even angrier. He sneered again and again. Only Ruan Hongling looked solemn. She asked in a deep voice, "Are you here to ask for help?" Tachibana Wakako prostrated herself on the ground and begged in a voice that was almost crying, "Yes, we have suffered heavy casualties now. Master Li Yundong, please help us for the sake of the fact that the cultivation world of China and Japan are separated by a strip of water." After she finished speaking, the little foxes next to her said sarcastically, "Humph, before you shouted to fight and kill, now that you are in trouble, you think of us? What have you been doing before?" Although this was what Ruan Hongling was thinking, she knew that she needed to take up the responsibility now, so she said seriously, "I understand what you mean but I can't make the decision. Moreover, Li Yundong is indeed undergoing the tribulation in seclusion. Even if the sky falls down now, it's useless. We can only wait for his yang spirit to come back." Tachibana Wakako was greatly disappointed and looked at her with almost desperate eyes. At this time, Abe was even more furious and shouted angrily, "Tachibana Wakako, get up. Even if all of us are broken, we can't beg others like this." After that, he flicked his sleeves and left angrily. Tachibana Wakako had no choice but to stand up in panic. She bent down and bowed to Ruan Hongling, Lin Miao and the little foxes. She said with tears in her eyes, "Please convey my message to Master Li Yundong. If he is willing to help, we will always remember his good deeds. Please." Although Ruan Hongling also hated the Japanese, she felt quite uncomfortable when she saw a little girl like Tachibana Wakako crying like a pear blossom in the rain. She had no choice but to nod in agreement. Seeing her nod, Tachibana Wakako felt a little relieved and went downstairs. However, in this strange city she only felt that the world was vast and boundless. She was at a loss, but she didn't know where to go now that she couldn't ask for help. Chapter 840. Tachibana Wakako stood downstairs of Li Yunyang's house and cried silently. Abe Naoto, who was beside her, also calmed down at this time. He knew that he was young and impulsive, but he didn't think that his judgment was wrong. A person who was in cahoots with the fox spirit asked him to crusade against the mystical silver fox? Are you kidding me? Speaking of which, although the two wise men, Kaisai Hikariyoshi and Ise Kanemitsu, had predicted that there might be such trouble and had tried to help him, but at that time, Abe Naoto's mind was filled with anger and hatred, and he did not listen to what they said. Abe Naoto had messed up the matter. Although he was a little afraid and regretful, he still refused to admit his mistake. He just scolded Tachibana Wakako, "Don't cry. Let's go back. The Chinese cultivation world is full of cowards. They won't help us. In the world, only self-improvement and self-help is the right way." How could Tachibana Wakako believe his words? But she couldn't disobey him face to face, so she could only say, "But if we go back like this, we will be ashamed of the great trust of our predecessors." Abe Naoto was silent. After a long time he said, "Is there only one master in the Chinese cultivation world? This person is a little older than us, so he must be very strong. Why don't we go and ask the cultivators of other sects for help? What do you think?" This sentence suddenly woke Tachibana Wakako up. She suddenly thought, "Yes, didn't my mother say that there is a great master named Wang Yuanshan in the Chinese cultivation world? It should be possible to ask him to help, right? Moreover, for the sake of his mother, he should also lend a helping hand, right?" Thinking of this, Tachibana Wakako was overjoyed and said, "By the way, let's go to the Jingyi school and ask for help from Wang Yuanshan." Wang Yuanshan? Abe Naoto was a little confused. Who is this? Tachibana Wakako hadn't heard her mother talk about the relationship between Wang Yuanshan and Ao Wushuang, so at this time, she didn't tell Abe Naoto about the relationship between Wang Yuanshan and the fox spirit. She just told him that Wang Yuanshan had once defeated Tsuruko Tachibana, and Abe Naoto immediately let out a cry. Japan was a country that paid particular attention to the order of merit. There was an order of seniority between the young and the old. Abe Naoto himself was an outstanding young man. When someone like him heard that there was someone more outstanding than him, his first reaction was, "Impossible. How could he be so strong at such a young age?" But when Abe heard that Wang Yuanshan was of the same generation as Tsuruko Tachibana, he immediately became much more respectful. He was an old senior. When he heard that he had completely defeated Tsuruko Tachibana, he was immediately filled with respect. Tsuruko Tachibana was also a top master in the Japanese cultivation world back then. Did he know why she suddenly resigned from the position of patriarch and went into seclusion? Now Abe Naoko knew that she went into seclusion after being defeated by Wang Yuanshan. To be able to defeat Lord Tsuruko Tachibana at that time, he must be an earth-shattering expert. Abe immediately said, "Okay, then let's go find him." However, Tsuruko Tachibana refused to move and said solemnly, "Mr. Naoto, you have to promise me that you can't be impulsive anymore. Our personal honor is a small matter. The survival of the cultivation world is a big matter." Being taught a lesson by a girl who was several years older than him, Abe Naoto felt a little ashamed. He nodded solemnly and promised solemnly, "This time I won't fight back or scold back." After their discussion, they quickly set off for Mount Longhu. After arriving at the foot of Mount Longhu, they met a Taoist priest who seemed to be wandering around but was actually patrolling. Tachibana Wakako respectfully told them about her intention to visit Wang Yuanshan. Several Taoist priests immediately looked at each other and said, "Wait here for a while." With that, the Taoist priest walked to a place not far away and picked up his mobile phone to report the situation here. After a while, a slim female Taoist priest came down with a foreigner with deep eyes and a high nose. Before she got close, the female Taoist priest shouted loudly. Before she arrived, her voice reached them first. "Eldest Shiji is in seclusion and so is eldest uncle. What's the matter?" This female Taoist priest was none other than Zhang Lufang. At this time she was the most idle person in the Jingyi school. When she heard that there was something going on, she jumped down. Naturally, Li Sun followed her like a shadow. When the patrolling Taoist priest saw Zhang Lufang, he pointed at Tachibana Wakako and Abe and said, "There are two Japanese. They said that they wanted to see Sherbo Wang. What should we do?" Zhang Lufang blinked and looked at Tachibana Wakako curiously. She quickly recognized her and said in surprise, "Oh, aren't you Tachibana Wakako? What are you doing here?" Mount Longhu was a famous mountain for thousands of years, and it was also the holy land of Taoism in China. Its reputation alone was above that of Xinyin Tantrism. Moreover, for thousands of years, many people had ascended to immortality from Mount Longhu, so it was naturally majestic and magnificent. Its majesty was naturally not something that a grassroots team like the Fox Zen School could compare with. Even the proud Abe did not dare to be presumptuous in front of Mount Longhu. He lowered his eyes and said nothing. Tachibana Wakako said respectfully, "We want to see Jinren Wang Yuanshan. We have something very important to report." Zhang Lufang giggled and said, "Sherbo Wang is probably going through the Thunder Retribution. I'm afraid you won't be able to see him." Tachibana Wakako's heart immediately sank to the bottom. Ah! Is he also going through the Thunder Retribution? Zhang Lufang looked at them strangely. It's the Awakening Hibernation Festival now. Every minute and every second is as precious as gold. Why don't you hurry up and go through the Thunder Retribution? Tachibana Wakako was almost desperate. She couldn't help but cry. When will it end? Zhang Lufang thought for a moment and said, after the Awakening Hibernation Festival is the Spring Festival, and after the Spring Festival is the Qingming Festival and the Guyu Festival. At this time, it's not suitable to go through the Thunder Retribution. In this way there should be more than 10 days left. Tachibana Wakako felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She couldn't help exclaiming in despair, more than 10 days? Seeing her expression, Abe Naoto's heart sank. He asked, Wakako, what's wrong? Don't you want us to see him? At this time, Tachibana Wakako's heart really sank to the bottom. She bit her lips, tears streaming down her face, and nodded heavily. Abe Naoto couldn't help raising his eyebrows. He said to Zhang Lufang in a very stiff Chinese language, we have a very important matter. We want to see Wang Yuanshan. Zhang Lufang also put her hands on her hips, imitated his tone, and said, Sherbo Wang also has a very important matter. He can't see you. Abe Naoto was furious. He suddenly took a step back, took a deep breath, and roared loudly, Wang Yuanshan, Wang Yuanshan. His cultivation was not low. As soon as he shouted, the mountains turned back, and his stiff voice could be heard everywhere. Zhang Lufang, a good-tempered person, couldn't help but frown and shout, Hey, why don't you listen to me? I told you, Sherbo Wang Heech. Before she could finish her words, she suddenly heard a magnetic voice next to her, saying gently, Who's calling me? Zhang Lufang was stunned. Then she turned around and saw a handsome man standing behind her. She didn't know when he had appeared here. She couldn't help but say in surprise, Sherbo Wang? You're here? Then she said with some embarrassment, I'm sorry, Sherbo Wang. I disturbed you. I couldn't stop them. At this time, the two patrolling Taoist priests also came forward to greet Wang Yuanshan. Wang Yuanshan was easygoing. After returning the salute with a smile, he turned to Zhang Lufang and waved his hand. Then he looked at Tachibana Wakako and said with a smile, You are Tsuruko Tachibana's daughter? Tachibana Wakako didn't expect that she would see Wang Yuanshan again when she was at the end of her rope. She was so excited that her face turned red. Yes, no. Tsuruko Tachibana is my daughter. Wang Yuanshan was stunned for a moment and then he sighed. It turns out to be her granddaughter. She looks so much like her. I thought she was a girl. Alas, time really flies, she already has a granddaughter. Then he sighed and said, How is Tsuruko Tachibana now? Is she still fetching water? The corners of Wang Yuanshan's mouth curled into a slight smile as he said this. It seemed that he was still a little proud of his prank back then. Tachibana Wakako quickly shook her head and said, Thanks to you, she has now understood your teachings. She stopped fetching water and began to repair her 5 leaks. A strange light flashed in Wang Yuanshan's eyes. She understood it? She's not simple. Well, with her aptitude, if she can understand this, her future achievements will be limitless. Hearing his praise, Tachibana Wakako felt honored, and her face turned red with excitement. Wang Yuanshan's eyes soon fell on Abe Naomi again. His eyes were not sharp, but there was an invisible majesty in them. Moreover, in Abe Naomi's eyes, although this famous master was approachable, his whole body seemed to be integrated with heaven and earth, and his strength was unfathomable. Abe Naomi did not dare to be presumptuous. He stood respectfully and lowered his head to Wang Yuanshan's ear. Please forgive me for offending you just now. Wang Yuanshan smiled and said, What's your name? Abe Naomi said, My name is Abe Naomi and I'm the patriarch of the Abe family. Wang Yuanshan frowned slightly. The patriarch of the Abe family? Then his eyes flashed and his face froze. He also knew the Japanese cultivation world quite well. He knew that Abe Yuji should be in his prime, and it was impossible for him to die suddenly, or pass on the position of patriarch to such a young boy. He said in a deep voice, Abe Yuji is dead? Who killed him? Abe Naomi couldn't help kneeling down and crying, It's the mystical silver fox. Zhang Lufang and the 2 Taoist priests gasped in shock. Only Li Sun stood there in a daze. He didn't know who the mystical silver fox was. Wang Yuanshan's eyes became extremely complicated in an instant. He slowly looked back at the spirit mountain where he was, and then slowly looked in the direction of Tianan City. He slowly closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, they were full of calmness and detachment, as if he had seen through life and death. Wang Yuanshan smiled slightly and said, I know why you are here. Are you here to ask for help? At this time, Tachibana Wakako also knelt down with Abe Naomi and cried, Yes, please forgive the past and help us. Wang Yuanshan smiled softly and said, "Get up. Even if you don't ask, I will go. This is an agreement that was made 10 years ago." Tachibana Wakako was at a loss, not knowing what his last sentence meant. She just stood up with Abe. Wang Yuanshan turned around and bowed slightly to Zhang Lufeng. He said, "Go and tell Zhang Kongyun that I'm going to fulfill the agreement. Please ask him to fulfill the agreement." After that, he flicked his sleeves and walked out of the mountain leisurely. Zhang Lufeng was confused and couldn't help shouting at Wang Yuanshan's back, "Hey, what agreement? My master is going through the thunder retribution. Uncle Wang, hey, Uncle Wang." But no matter how she shouted, Wang Yuanshan did not turn around. When he walked out of the range of the mountain, suddenly there was a loud sound in the sky, and a bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, causing the earth to tremble. Zhang Lufeng, Tachibana Wakako, and the others couldn't help raising their heads, but they suddenly saw two whirlpools appear in the clouds in the sky in an instant. They were like a pair of majestic eyes staring at Wang Yuanshan. Wherever he went, the two pairs of eyes followed him. Although Wang Yuanshan was walking, his speed was extremely fast. In a short while he was far away, and the rolling thunderclouds were also chasing after him, surging away. Chapter 841. Zhang Lufeng was tongue-tied as she watched Wang Yuanshan go away. She suddenly had a feeling that this Shu Wang, who had once been famous in the world, seemed to be gone forever. But this thought was only a moment, and something more important attracted her attention. The mystical silver fox had been resurrected. This was earth-shattering news. Zhang Lufeng watched Wang Yuanshan go away in a daze. Suddenly she was excited. This must be an earth-shattering battle. How can I miss such a good show? The eyes of this little Taoist nun who was afraid of the world being in chaos were shining with excitement, but she didn't think about it at all. What if the mystical silver fox wins? She turned around excitedly and ran up the mountain. At this time, Zhang Ling and Zhang Kongyun had both chosen to cultivate in seclusion. Zhang Tianshi was busy crossing the thunder tribulation, so he did not participate in the battle to encircle the mystical silver fox. The only person she could share this news with was Zhang Tianhe. Zhang Lufeng ran up the mountain like a wisp of smoke. Li Sun, who was behind her, couldn't keep up with her. He stumbled behind her and shouted. Zhang Lufeng quickly ran toward the side peak where Wang Yuanshan was. Before she got close, she saw from a distance that the entrance of the mountain was already full of people. There were Taoist priests everywhere. These Taoist priests seemed to be sitting cross-legged in a scattered manner, but Zhang Lufeng could tell at a glance that their positions were in line with the Ziwei Star Palace. They were stepping on the seven-star magic formation under their feet. There were horsetail whisks in front of them and swords on their backs. It seemed that everyone was meditating with their eyes closed. However, as soon as Zhang Lufeng approached, everyone opened their eyes. Their eyes were like countless sharp swords, staring at Zhang Lufeng in unison. They were full of murderous intent, and the swords behind them jumped out with a clang. In an instant, the brilliance shone in all directions, and the sword chi rushed into the sky. Zhang Lufeng had no doubt that as long as she took another step forward, she would be pierced through by the sword. The power of the Dharma array lay in its ability to repeatedly stack the cultivation bases of many cultivators of average strength together, forming a geometrical change in power. Although it was limited by the shortcoming theory, if a large Dharma array could find many cultivators of similar cultivation bases who worked well together, the power of the Dharma array would be far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Wang Yuanshan was known as the best in the world, but even he had to admit defeat when he met the Shen-Tian sect's killing wolf extermination formation. He did not dare to enter the formation. It could be seen that there was a limit to one's strength. Even in the face of a formation, one had to admit defeat. However, the Dharma array was not something that just any sect could play with. First of all, the selection of the Dharma array was a huge challenge. Not only must everyone have the same intention, but their magic power and cultivation must also be of the same origin. Otherwise, if you went east and I went west, your cultivation would be rejected by me. How could you achieve the superposition of your magic power? Therefore, there were very few sects in the world that were qualified to play with the Dharma array. Only a few major cultivation sects such as Jingyi school could practice a Dharma array of such a scale. Zhang Lufeng recognized at a glance that this Dharma array was the 7 stars array. It had the outer 7 stars and the inner 7 stars. The outer 7 stars consisted of 3 people. The 3 people formed a corner and formed the outer 7 stars. In the middle stood 7 Taoist priests with higher cultivation bases. They stood alone and formed the inner 7 stars. Compared to the Xian Tian sect's killing wolf extermination formation, this Dharma array was not as powerful, but it was more flexible. It could be used to attack and defend. If someone wanted to break into the Dharma array from the outside, the Dharma array would be activated and the Dharma array would respond. The combination of the Dharma array and the Dharma array would be like the raging waves of the sea. Its power was infinite and it could grind people to death. If they wanted to take the initiative to attack, they could also rely on their proficient body techniques and cooperation. The inner formation would launch a surprise attack and the outer formation would contain them. The attacks were endless and extremely terrifying. Zhang Lufang saw that the 7 people in the inner formation were using the Big Dipper as a shield. The one standing in front was Zhang Tianhe, who was holding the Big Dipper sword. Zhang Tianhe stood in the position of the Dubhe star, which was known as the sole god of the sun. The sword chi all over his body was awe-inspiring. Zhang Lufang immediately stopped, waved at Zhang Tianhe and shouted, "Senior brother Tianhe, it's me. Can you let me come over?" Zhang Tianhe shook his head. Although his voice was calm, his tone was indescribably firm. "Junior sister, you should go back quickly. No one is allowed to come near here." Zhang Lufang asked curiously, "It's me. Can't I go too?" Zhang Tianhe said resolutely, "No one is allowed." Zhang Liufang's desire to share gossip with others was immediately dealt a blow. She looked resentful and disappointed as she looked at Zhang Tianhe. At that moment, Li Sun was out of breath and running over, covered in dirt from the fall. Zhang Lufang saw him and shouted angrily, "Let's go. Senior brother Tianhe has turned his back on us." After saying that, she walked down the mountain angrily. Li Sun was at a loss. He looked at Zhang Tianhe and the others who were in a tight formation and then looked at Zhang Lufang. In the end, he could only helplessly run down the mountain with her. At this moment, within the mountain cave behind Zhang Tianhe, every single talisman and rune hidden within the mountain cave glowed faintly. An indescribable force constantly flowed within the talisman and rune, like a myriad of rivers flowing along a river channel into a lake or ocean, ultimately forming into a terrifying tsunami. These forces slowly converged and fused, continuously climbing and extending towards the top of the magic circle. Finally, they converged at the entrance of a cave. An aura that was hard to be seen by the naked eye soared into the sky, supporting the 2 majestic thunderclouds in the sky to move towards the east. Zhang Lufang was still a young girl and she was lively and playful. She never kept her mouth shut, so she couldn't hide anything from Zhang Tianhe. She couldn't find Zhang Tianhe to share this matter with, so she could only sulk and stare blankly, as if something was stifling in her heart. But soon she suddenly remembered something. She quickly ran back to her residence, took out her mobile phone, and sent the news she knew to some of the Taoist friends of other sects with whom she had a good relationship. This time the news spread. In the information age, there were no secrets that could be hidden. Suddenly, the whole cultivation world knew that the mystical silver fox had appeared in Suyi. Almost all cultivators knew that Wang Yuanshan had gone to Japan. At this time, the whole cultivation world was in an uproar. However, at this time, Tachibana Wakako and Abe Naoko didn't know that after they invited Wang Yuanshan, they didn't think of going to other sects to invite others. In their opinion, the only thing they lacked was a top master like Wang Yuanshan. They didn't lack other low-level masters at all. Could even be said that they could find a lot of them. Logically speaking, the 2 of them should be happy that they had finally invited a top master, but in fact they were burning with anxiety. The reason was very simple, because Wang Yuanshan insisted on walking to Suyi. What a joke. Although Wang Yuanshan's 1 step was 10 steps for an ordinary person, he was still walking. How long would it take to walk to Japan like this? There was still the sea in the middle. But although Wang Yuanshan was amiable, he had a great bearing and a strong aura. Moreover, his reputation, age and experience were all there, so the 2 Japanese juniors did not dare to breathe too loudly. They were afraid that they would say something wrong and provoke this great master to turn against them. If that happened, they would be in big trouble. However, after walking with Wang Yuanshan for a day and a night, the 2 of them finally walked out of Jiangxi province and entered Zhejiang province. At this speed, they were afraid that they would have to cross the sea, enter Nagasaki, cross Oita, go through Kobe, go to Kyoto, and then pass through Nagano and Gunma counties before they could reach Izaki County. How long would it take for him to walk like this? This time, Tachibana Wakako and Abe were so anxious that they scratched their ears and cheeks, like ants on a hot pan. They wanted to urge him, but they didn't dare to. Along the way, the 2 of them were so anxious that they seemed to be acting in a pantomime. They winked at each other and urged each other to speak. Wang Yuanshan didn't seem to know anything. He just kept walking forward with his hands clasped behind his back. Far behind him was a thundercloud. This thundercloud had been left far behind by him. From his point of view, he could only see a dark cloud faintly following in the distant sky. It wasn't something that would surprise anyone. Wang Yuanshan himself knew that he couldn't fly to Suyi at once. First, it would consume a lot of spiritual energy. He had to save every bit of spiritual energy in Jinshi to entangle the mystical silver fox when he came. He didn't expect to be able to kill the mystical silver fox by himself. The only thing he had to do was to stall the mystical silver fox and wait for the arrival of the 9 heavens divine night thunder. If he flew too fast, the speed of the heavenly thunder would also increase greatly. When he flew to Suyi, the mystical silver fox would see such a big thundercloud following behind Wang Yuanshan. Would she run away? In those days, the mystical silver fox had been besieged and beaten by everyone. Even if she couldn't beat them, she would still run away. Would she foolishly wait for the 9 heavens divine night thunder to come and take her away now? Therefore he couldn't be fast even if he wanted to. However, he couldn't tell these words to these 2 Japanese friends. There was a saying in the Book of Changes, if the monarch is not secretive, he will lose his minister. If the minister is not secretive, he will lose his life. Therefore, a gentleman is cautious and does not come out. It means that if a person wants to achieve great things, he must first shut his mouth. Wang Yuanshan had cultivated for many years, and his bearing and self-restraint were first class. Naturally he understood this truth. Tachibana Wakako and Abe followed behind Wang Yuanshan with sad faces. Finally, Tachibana Wakako couldn't help it. Relying on her young age, she pretended to be obedient and cute. She asked timidly, "Senior, when will we go like this? If we delay for 1 more minute now, it is very likely that the mystical silver fox will become stronger." Wang Yuanshan didn't stop. He turned his head and looked at her with a smile. He said, "Don't worry. No matter how strong she becomes, I have a way to deal with her." His words made Tachibana Wakako and Abe look at each other and calm down a little. But what they really wanted to say was, if we delay for 1 more minute, the Japanese cultivation world will suffer a greater loss. In fact, Abe even thought to himself, could it be that this great master wants to wait for the mystical silver fox to destroy our Japanese cultivation world and then take advantage of it? This sentence was a little selfish, but according to the entanglement of the cultivation world in China, it was not impossible. Wang Yuanshan also seemed to be aware of his thoughts. He turned his head and looked at him. His eyes were deep and penetrating. At once, Abe felt guilty and unconsciously lowered his head. Wang Yuanshan smiled slightly and said, "Don't look at the mystical silver fox. She is proud and arrogant. Since she let you call for help before, she won't make a move in advance. She will definitely wait for everyone to arrive before she makes a move." Abe boldly said, "But, Senior, if you hurry up, your chances of winning will be greater." Wang Yuanshan had a little entanglement with Tsuruko Tachibana back then. He couldn't speak Japanese, but he could understand some of it. He smiled and said, "You're wrong. If I'm slower, my chances of winning will be greater." Tachibana Wakako and Abe were shocked and asked in unison, "Why?" Wang Yuanshan smiled and said, "Because there are more reinforcements behind me." Tachibana Wakako and Abe looked at each other. They didn't know that the news of the mystical silver fox had quickly set off a wave in the Chinese cultivation world. Many sects had become active because of this. Chapter 842. The news of the mystical silver fox quickly spread to all the sects in the Chinese cultivation world, and many cultivators began to argue fiercely. The reason for their argument was also very simple. Should they go to support the Japanese cultivation world? The reason for their opposition was very simple. The Japanese cultivation world had invaded China with the army decades ago, causing great losses to the Chinese cultivation world. They hadn't settled this account yet. Why should they help them? The reason for their affirmative attitude was also very simple. Although the Chinese cultivation world had a deep grudge against them, the mystical silver fox was the common enemy of the whole cultivation world. At this time, there should be no difference between countries, let alone between sections. Otherwise it would be self-destruction. Therefore the most heated debate was between the younger generation of Buddhism and Taoism, such as Wei Qing and Yu Sheng. Because they were stuck in the Yangshan phase and could not break through to the Jinshan phase, every day after cultivation, they would log on to the website forum under the cultivation world to argue with others. Most of them were strongly opposed to it. The Buddhist cultivators, on the other hand, had a close relationship with the Buddhist cultivation world in Japan, so most of them had a positive and sympathetic attitude towards the Japanese cultivation world. The relationship between the Taoist cultivators and the Japanese cultivation world was thin, so the Taoist cultivators had a rather bad impression of the Japanese. However, the Buddhism of China and Japan could be said to be of the same origin. In addition, in recent years, the Buddhist cultivation world in China and Japan had been very close. Naturally, the Buddhist cultivators' rejection of the Japanese was relatively weak. Moreover, in the eyes of many Buddhist cultivators, there was no difference between countries or races in Buddhism. In those years, Master Huigua Ali, the seventh generation of Taming, foresaw the end of the Dharma ending period. Many of his Chinese disciples did not teach the true methods, but he taught all the true methods and magic treasures to a Japanese disciple who had just entered the sect for a month, Master Hirofa. Because he thought that only Hirofa could inherit his mantle, the purpose of passing on the magic treasures and true methods to him was to let Hirofa escape to Japan with Tangmi's true methods. After that, as expected, Tangmi completely disappeared from mainland China because of the three martial arts extermination movement. However, because Master Hongfa brought Tangmi to Japan and then founded Jinyan Tantrism, Tangmi continued to develop. Therefore, the cultivators of Chinese Buddhism believed that although there was friction between the cultivation world of China and Japan, in general, there were mutual benefits. Japan inherited the Dharma of China and eventually passed it down and carried it forward. The parts of the Dharma of China that were lost could also be found in Japan. As the saying went, if China was lost, it would be the barbarians. It was also because of this that the Buddhist cultivators had selected a large number of masters early on and set out for Japan. Among them, many experts from Shiyuan Temple, Hanshan Temple, Jinshan Temple, Wutai Mountain, and Putuo Mountain had already arrived near Suyi. On the other hand, the Taoist cultivators were still arguing endlessly. Although Mount Wuhua was still a very small sect in the Chinese Taoist cultivation world, it was still a small sect, so the argument was inevitable. They were arguing fiercely with flushed faces. Some people strongly opposed going to Japan, while others thought that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and they should take the initiative to stand up for it. Song Guohua and Alba were watching from the side and did not participate. Song Guohua was a slippery person and did not want to offend either side. Alba's level of Chinese language was limited, and it was difficult for her to understand. She could only watch from the side, not knowing what these people were arguing about. While they were arguing, they suddenly heard a cold voice. "What are you arguing about?" Everyone turned their heads and saw that Ding Nan had come out of her cultivation residence. At this time she was wearing a silk gown with excellent ventilation, and the knuckles under her feet were also hand-sewn silk. Silk was the most difficult material to make into clothes of the same kind. Because the material was too soft, it could only be sewn by hand. A slightly inferior tailor would not dare to take silk work at all, because a slight mistake in the needle or a slight knife could completely destroy a piece of silk. The Yin and Yang sects of Mount Wuhua were not rich, but Song Guohua, a flatterer, still tried his best to squeeze out some money to customize such a close-fitting silk dress for Ding Nan. The style of this silk dress was similar to a Tang suit, but the clothes were embroidered with a picture of 100 birds looking up to the phoenix. It was colorful and beautiful from head to toe. Ding Nan also had a very outstanding model figure. Even if she stood next to Li Yundong, she would not be much shorter. She was wearing this silk dress, which not only showed her exquisite figure, but also set off her extraordinary temperament and outstanding. Moreover, at this time, Ding Nan had broken through to the Jinshin phase, and her self-confidence had soared. She thought that this dress was very suitable for her, especially the picture of 100 birds looking up to the phoenix, which was in line with her inner thoughts. One day she would make people like Zhou Qin crawl under her feet. In the beginning, Ding Nan only dared to play at the edge of the thunderclouds during the thunder tribulation. But as she practiced the Yin and Yang methods of the Yin and Yang sects, and it happened to be the period of waking up, the spiritual qi between heaven and earth was full. The Yin and Yang qi greatly increased her cultivation, causing her cultivation to soar at an astonishing speed. Although she did not break through to the thunder tribulation phase, she could already roll on the edge of the thunderclouds and withstand 1 or 2 heavenly thunders. This was not a big deal for those great masters who had long been famous, or for people like Li Yundong. But for Ding Nan, who had no identity or background and had never come into contact with cultivation before, it was already rare for her to be able to cultivate to such a level in just a few months by relying purely on opportunities and her own personal understanding. It was already a rare case in thousands of years. Ding Nan was also well aware of this. Just think about it, a year ago she was still following Zhou Qin like a follower. In the scene of the upper class, she had to smile and curry favor with everyone she met. But now, she was already the leader of a sect, and her cultivation could go to heaven and earth. Those who she had to look up to in the past, now she could kill them with one finger. How could this not make her burst with confidence? When a person had strength, they would have self-confidence. When these two superimposed together, they could produce a qualitative change, and the temperament of the whole person would also change greatly. Especially after Ding Nan changed her clothes, it was as if she was wearing a dragon robe, and there was a very strong aura around her. As soon as she appeared, everyone was shocked by her aura, and they couldn't help but bow and flatter her. Five Flowers Palm Sect, the spiritual power of the gods, I am the only one in the world. They had practiced these words very well before. At this time, when Ding Nan showed the matching strength and aura, they became more fluent in their speech and there was no hindrance in their hearts. Even Alba, who was influenced by the company she kept, couldn't help but chuckle. She bent over awkwardly and said, "Things rise in the door, exert strength to pass through the kidneys, add injury to the low clouds, and envy the venerable." Her pronunciation was strange, and the cultivators of the Five Flowers sect next to her all sneered in a low voice. But then Ding Nan's sharp eyes swept over them, and they immediately became serious, not daring to make a sound. At this time, Ding Nan's Palm sect was becoming more and more majestic, and she was enjoying the feeling of being the Palm sect more and more. It was like taking drugs and it was difficult to get rid of them. She glanced at them majestically and said, "What are you arguing about? Don't you know that I'm cultivating in meditation?" Everyone was timid and looked at each other, not daring to speak. Only Song Guohua boldly said, "Palm sect, we're discussing whether we should go to Japan." Ding Nan frowned. What for? She had been cultivating in seclusion these days, so she naturally didn't know what had happened outside. Song Guohua told her what had happened and then said, "Palm sect, now all the sects are arguing about it. The bald donkeys of the Buddhist school have already set off. You see, wheat." At this time, if it were someone else, he would have to discuss it with his disciples. However, Ding Nan had been suffering enough from following Zhou Qin. Now that she was finally independent, she naturally wanted to act independently. She thought for a moment and thought to herself, this must be an earth-shattering battle. Although I don't know how powerful the mystical silver fox is, I have never seen it before. But since it can make so many sects in the cultivation world of the Middle Sun put down their prejudices and join hands to fight, it must be an extremely powerful opponent. Even Wang Yuanshan has gone, but I don't know, will that guy go? In Ding Nan's opinion, even if all the cultivation sects in the world went to Suyi, it would not be as good as the man named Li Yundong going to Suyi alone. If he went, she would have to go even if there were countless difficulties and dangers. Otherwise, what was the point of working so hard to get through the thunder tribulation? Wasn't it to prove herself in front of him? Besides, if he went to Suyi, Zhou Qin would also go. It was a good opportunity for her to show her spiritual power and cultivation quotient. Otherwise, if she cultivated such amazing cultivation but didn't show it in front of Li Yundong and Zhou Qin, wouldn't it be like walking in the dark in brocade clothes? Thinking of this, Ding Nan thought to herself, Li Yundong is known as the reincarnated wisdom king, and there are so many foxes under him. I think, it's hard for me to stay out of it, right? You should go. At this time, Ding Nan no longer hesitated. She immediately said decisively, yes, all the cultivation sects in the world will go. How can we be absent? This is a good opportunity to prove to the cultivation world that we are the Yin-Yang sect. Her words were dignified, but in fact she only wanted to prove herself to those two people. But her disciples couldn't hear it at all. They were so excited that they couldn't control themselves. One by one they began to shout loudly. Seeing that Ding Nan had made up her mind, Song Guohua sighed in his heart. Then he cheered up and prepared for their trip to Suyi, Japan. He knew that Ding Nan was very ostentatious. This time she would also make a grand appearance. Therefore he immediately arranged for everyone to dismantle and assemble Ding Nan's 8-bearer sedan chair. Only then did they take the cumbersome luggage and surround Ding Nan, who was ready. They went down the mountain in a lively manner, as if as soon as Ding Nan appeared, the mystical silver fox would flee at the sight of the wind. Ding Nan also looked at her entourage with pride. Her heart had already flown to a distant foreign country. She was thinking about how to meet Li Yundong and how to make Zhou Qin lose face. But she had never thought. If Li Yundong didn't go, and if they didn't defeat the mystical silver fox, what would the consequences be? Chapter 843. Dongwu City, Shantang Town. Early in the morning, Lu Yi woke up from his meditation. He was wearing a gray robe, navy blue silk pants and cloth shoes with 1,000 soles. He looked like a burly and sturdy farmer, but his eyes were deeply set with a pair of black eyes, deep and distant. When his eyes focused, they were extremely penetrating. He was not handsome, but he had a strange appearance. His eyebrows were extremely long, and there was an air of wisdom between them. At this time he was slowly buttoning his clothes. Mainyang was standing quietly next to him, watching him tidy up his clothes. In her impression, although Lu Yi was a very particular person on weekdays, he was very different today. Today, Lu Yi seemed to pay special attention to every button he fastened, as if he was about to go on a long journey. Although Mainyang was used to the man in front of her appearing and disappearing like a ghost, today she felt a little sad for no reason. "Are you going on a long journey?" Mainyang couldn't help but step forward. She stretched out her hand and tidied up the wrinkles on Lu Ye's clothes, like a little wife taking care of a man who was about to go on a long journey. Lu Yi looked at the woman in front of him with gentle eyes. He suddenly smiled and said, "Mainyang, how long have you been with me?" Mainyang couldn't help but roll her eyes at Lu Yi and said angrily, "You still have the nerve to say that? You suddenly appeared to save me and then you disappeared again. This time you disappeared for more than 10 years. Don't you know that I wanted to follow you back then?" Lu Yi smiled. The cunning former fox Zen master's smile was particularly warm at this time. He reached out his hand and stroked Mainyang's black hair. "You saved me first back then." Mainyang's eyes flashed. She couldn't help but think of the time when she was playing in the mountains when she was a child. She accidentally saved a seriously injured silver fox, but she didn't expect that it turned out to be a fox spirit. One day when she was playing in the mountains and almost fell off a cliff, this fox spirit appeared and saved her life. Mainyang smiled softly and said, "Yes, you should have taken me with you back then. Why didn't you take me with you at that time? You made me take so many detours." Lu Yi let out a sigh. At that time he had been trying his best to resurrect the mystical silver fox. At that time he had offended a great master in the cultivation world and was being hunted all over the world. He couldn't protect himself. How could he have the time and mind to take a woman with him? But because of this delay, when he met her, she had already fallen to become a prostitute. The cute little boy in the past had already become a seductive little girl. Lu Yi looked at Mainyang lovingly, stretched out his hand to touch her cheek and said softly, "At that time he was." Mainyang couldn't help but tilt her head and greedily use her cheek to feel the warmth coming from the other party's palm. She said in a daze, "What's wrong with the child? Back then I didn't despise you for being old, but now you despise me for being young?" Lu Yi laughed. Foxes were infatuated with love regardless of gender. Once they identified a target, they would never change their mind. In his mind he could betray everyone in the world, but he couldn't betray this woman in front of him. Lu Yi had always been cold-hearted and ruthless. He regarded all the people in the world as chess pieces, and he could not abandon them. Even Ao Wushuang, who was his most valued disciple, could be sacrificed, not to mention Su Chan and the other little foxes. In particular, he had watched his most favored disciple Mo Ashi be killed by Yen Fang and then replaced. But he had endured it without batting an eyelid, and even talked and laughed with his enemy for 9 years. How ruthless and cold-blooded was this? How much forbearance and perseverance was this? But when Lu Yi accidentally found that his little child had become a prostitute, his heart softened, and he felt a burst of heartache for no reason. So he had been taking care of her, helping her get out of the sea of suffering and no longer serving others. She had also accompanied him loyally and helped him manage his money. She waited without complaint or regret, as if she didn't notice that her youth was passing little by little. Lu Yi also knew that this time when he went out, there would be a fierce battle of life and death. He had been preparing for more than 10 years for such an opportunity. Maybe this time he could get what he wanted and win, and the Fox Zen sect would completely turn over. But he also knew that the greater the profit, the greater the risk. If he failed, the consequences would be unpredictable. Even if he was lucky enough to escape, he might never be able to see Mainyang again. Thinking of this, Lu Yi couldn't help but say to Mainyang, "I'm going out for a while. Maybe 3 or 5 or 7 days, maybe 3 or 5 or 7 years. I don't know, and I might not come back again." As he spoke, Lu Ye's eyes became softer and softer. He whispered, "If I don't come back after a week, don't wait for me. Leave here. I left a bank book in the room. There's some money in it. It should be enough for you to spend in the future." Mainyang's body trembled slightly. She couldn't help but clench her hands, but she quickly loosened them. She smiled softly and reached out to touch Lu Ye's cheek. What are you talking about? I will always wait for you to come back. I'll stay here and I won't go anywhere. Lu Yi smiled and didn't say anything more. He turned around and walked out of the room. As soon as he walked out of the room, he saw Wang Jinyuan standing in the courtyard. Wang Jinyuan looked at him with interest as if he had just met him for the first time. He smiled and said, "Jinren Lu, you finally came out." As soon as Lu Yi came out of the door, the tenderness in his eyes and the warm smile on his face disappeared in an instant, replaced by cold indifference and dignity. He glanced at Wang Jinyuan coldly and said in a cold voice, "Master Wan, are you ready?" Wang Jinyuan smiled and said, 10 years of preparation just for today. How can I not be ready early?" Lu Yi nodded slowly and said, "Well, February 2nd, the dragon will raise its head. It's already past February 2nd, and it's time for the dragon to raise its head." Wang Jinyuan laughed and said, "Jinren Lu, you have endured for more than 10 years, and you have accumulated a lot of experience. I think you will regain your power in the future. Congratulations." Lu Yi didn't say anything. He just snorted and walked out. After he got out of the door, he paused as if he wanted to look back, but he didn't. He just walked straight out of the door. Wang Jinyuan looked back at Yu Tian, who was a little confused, and said with a smile, "Jinren Yu, you stay here for the next few days. Jinren Lu and I will go out to do something. If everything goes well, I think you will be able to get your revenge in these days." Yu Tian immediately became excited and said, "Jinren Yu, are you going to go out and take revenge for me?" Wang Jinyuan said with a smile, "Yes, but also no. However, there is some connection after all. Jinren Yu, don't worry. I will definitely not let you be wronged." Only then did Yu Tian feel relieved. He watched Wang Jinyuan go out of the door. Mei Nyang, who was not far away, suddenly quickened her steps and rushed to the door. She leaned against the door and watched Lu Ye's figure disappear into the antique bluestone street. Yu Tian also stood at the door and watched them leave. Suddenly, he muttered in a low voice, "Why do I feel that their departure is a little strange?" Mei Nyang smiled slightly and remained silent. She never asked about Lu Ye's identity, nor did she ask about his affairs. She just silently accompanied him and waited for him to come back every time. She didn't know what Lu Yi was going to do, nor did she know how long he would be gone. The only thing she knew was that it would be of no use even if she asked more. If he wanted to come back, he would naturally come back. All she needed to do was wait here patiently. After Lu Yi and Wang Jinyuan left, in the depths of the alley, a middle-aged monk in a yellow robe also watched them from afar. The monk turned his head and said to an old monk beside him, "Master, he has left. Should we take action?" This old monk was none other than Purin, the abbot of Shiyuan Temple. Purin chanted the name of Buddha in a low voice and said, "Amitabha, the devil has finally appeared. Let's follow him. It seems that this time the dagger will be revealed. I don't know how many people will die this time. Alas, people will be plunged into misery and suffering." This middle-aged monk was Feikong, who had fought with Li Yunyang before. Feikong's expression was grim. He said in a deep voice, "We cultivate not only to transcend and become Buddhas, or to save all living beings, but also to subdue demons and enforce justice on behalf of heaven. Even if we die in the last battle, I think Buddha will smile happily and lead us to the Western paradise." Purin knew that he was being optimistic. When fighting with the top masters of the Fox Zen sect, the most terrifying thing was that they had a strong armor-piercing ability. When the seven-tailed fox god showed his true body, if he bit a cultivator to death with one bite, his body would be destroyed, but his yang spirit would still not be able to escape. When the 6 major sects besieged the Fox Zen sect, Yi Yu had killed many cultivators in this way. The 8-tailed earth fox and the 9-tailed celestial fox were even more exaggerated. They were born with a strong armor-piercing ability. The yang spirit of the cultivators killed by them would also be greatly injured, and it would be difficult for them to gather. Even when they reached the realm of the mystical silver fox, a pair of hands could be compared to the supreme divine weapons in the hands of ordinary people. When they chopped people, it would be like Takahashi Shota's Amitabha righteous saber. Not only would their bodies be destroyed, but their yang spirit would also be shattered. It was really terrifying to the extreme. It was terrifying to think about fighting against such a demon. Purin's heart was heavy. He didn't know how many of the monks in Shiyuan Temple, Jinshan Temple, and the others who had been preparing for many years would be able to return to their homeland. After Feikong finished speaking, his eyes fell on Mei Nyang, who was looking at them in the distance. He suddenly said, "Master, should we arrest her?" He glanced at Purin tentatively, implying that he would use this woman to threaten Lu Yi. Purin put his palms together and said slowly, Amitabha, she is just a poor woman. Let her go. Feikong didn't take it seriously, but he still lowered his head and said, Yes, Abbot. Purin took a deep look at him and said, Let's go. Your brothers are waiting. Our old friends are also waiting for us. After that, the two of them, one after the other, quickly disappeared in the streets of Shantang 7 miles. At this time, almost all the masters of the cultivation sects in the mainland of China had come out. The heroes of Nazuno in Takagi Prefecture, Japan, had gathered. Chapter 844. 2 days later, Nishino in Japan had become very lively. It was the first time that so many cultivation masters had gathered in this place since the earth-shattering war against the demons 900 years ago. Although the Japanese cultivation world had repeatedly kept a low profile and concealed it, with so many cultivators rushing to the same place, the common people might not be aware of it, but it was absolutely impossible for the high-level officials not to notice it. Later, the high-level officials secretly issued an unprecedentedly strict gag order and martial law. But even so, it could not stop many journalists. Some reporters from the Blackwood County TV station and NHK were squatting near Nishino, but they could not get close to the Killing Stone scenic area. As long as they were nearby, someone would come up to interrogate them. Those who could not show their ID were taken away, and those who had a reporter's ID were even taken away. Nishino had become a place where even a fly could not fly into. Because they did not know what had happened in the Killing Stone scenic area, the Japanese cultivation world and the political circles had reached an agreement and decided to release the news that they were besieging a fugitive murderer. Although the news was questioned by countless reporters and hosts of the TV station the moment it was released, Nishino's defense increased. The lie was repeated 1,000 times and it became the truth. Slowly, the whole country of Japan took it as the truth, and they began to guess who the murderer was and why he could make such a big noise. Recently, a fugitive murderer who had shaken the whole country of Japan was a man named Ikebashi Tatsuya. After he killed a British teacher in 2007, he changed his appearance and fled. Japan used the national police force to find him, but they could not find him. Later, Ikebashi Tatsuya published a book, which detailed how he changed his appearance and how he escaped. After the book was published, it was very popular and caused a sensation in Japan. However, people did not know what kind of sensation this murderer would cause compared to Ikebashi Tatsuya. The areas around Blackwood County of Japan were all talking about this topic, but they did not know that the person in Nishino was a big devil who had made the cultivation world tremble. Early in the morning, the Japanese cultivators who were resting on the mountains around the Killing Stone scenic area woke up early. These days, more and more Japanese cultivators came here, ready to fight to the death with the mystical silver fox. At this time, there were as many as dozens of cultivators from different sects gathered in the Killing Stone scenic area. Many of them came early and came alone. When they were tired, they sat cross-legged under the tree and rested for a while. Some cultivators who came later brought their families. Not only did they bring the disciples of different generations in the sect, but they also brought tents, futons and other items. At the foot of the mountain, there was a row of tents, which looked like a green line from a distance. With a large number of sects, it was inevitable that there would be complicated influences. With complicated influences, there would inevitably be conflicts. As the saying goes, where there are people there will be jianghu, and where there is jianghu there will be conflicts. This sentence had been true since ancient times, and it was not restricted by whether it was in China or not. The whole country of Japan was religious, so there were many sections. Among them, Shintoism had several major schools. The most powerful sect was Ise Shinto, which was founded in the 14th century AD by the Ise Grand Shrine's outer temple officials. The second was Yoshida Shinto, which was founded in the 15th century AD by the Yoshida Shrine officials of Kyoto's Yoshida Kanetsu. The inheritance of Ise Shinto had undergone great changes so far. Although in the beginning Ise Shinto was established to oppose the attachment of Shintoism to Buddhism, Taoism and Confucianism, it had multiplied to this day. Ise Chuyun and Ise Shenko, the heirs of Ise Shinto, were not only powerful masters of Shintoism, but also outstanding scholars of Buddhism, Confucianism and even Taoism culture. Therefore, the Ise Shinto was a sect of cultivation that was relatively friendly to Buddhism, Taoism and Confucianism. Yoshida Shinto, on the other hand, was the most famous stubborn sect in the Japanese cultivation world. They stubbornly clung to the doctrine of oneness advocated by the founder of Yoshida Shinto, Yoshida Kanji. They believed that Shintoism was the only one in the world, and the others were illusory and hypocritical doctrines. Therefore, Yoshida Shinto was also known as the One Shinto. Most of the cultivators who believed in such an idea were either paranoid or crazy. The better ones were also stubborn antiques. Among them, the priest of Yoshida Shinto, Yoshida Shinmura, was a typical believer of the only one. The so-called oneness meant that Shintoism was the only good thing in the world, and the others were bad. Japan was the best in the world, and the other countries were bad. Such a doctrine seemed absurd, but in fact, it catered to many right-wing elements and nationalists in Japan, and the sect was quite powerful. Because he did not participate in the battle at the first time, Yoshida Shinto arrived almost at the last moment. As soon as he appeared, Tsuyi suddenly became lively. Everyone saw that there were many believers in front and behind Yoshida Shinmura opening the way. The believers in front had red headscarves on their heads and wore white short robes. Although it was winter, their clothes were a little thin. However, these people were all red in the face and extremely excited. They were leading the way carrying a huge Yoshida Shrine's deity. Yoshida Shrine could be said to be one of the largest shrines in Japan. During the period of the Emperor of Civilization, Yoshida Kanji founded Yoshida Shinto was once the most powerful sect in Shintoism. The scale of the shrine was so large that it was rare in the world. The shrine worshipped and enshrined 3,032 inner gods. It could even be said that worshipping the Yoshida Shrine was like worshipping all the gods in Japan. Every year, at the beginning of the second month of the Gregorian calendar, the Yoshida Shrine would hold a large-scale ceremony. Many believers from all over the country would come to participate. The reason why Yoshida Shinto was delayed was because the Yoshida Shrine was holding such a ceremony. However, after the ceremony he received news from Tsuyi. This conceited old man waved his hands and led his subordinates towards Tsuyi. When the people on Mount Shuya looked over, they saw a group of people slowly moving along the stone path, like rolling dragons in the rain. Although the weather was somewhat dark, they could still clearly see the statues of gods on their shoulders. There were over 3,000 statues in the Yoshida Shrine. It was obviously impossible to move all of them. However, when the crowd looked over, they saw 3 people carrying a dozen statues and 5 people carrying a dozen statues. It was a huge crowd and it was bustling with noise and excitement. Yoshida Shinmura himself sat on a wooden platform, wearing a tall hat and a long robe. He was dressed like a priest. His face was covered with white powder and his forehead was red. He held a string of silver bells in one hand and a beautifully painted folding fan in the other. His entire body exuded an indescribable sense of nobility. He looked down at the people below the platform with a trace of contempt and disdain in his eyes. When the Ise Shindo's Chumo and Shinko saw him, they exchanged looks. Very quickly, Ise Shinko scratched his messy hair and said, "Ayaya, the situation has become difficult. This fellow still came in the end. I thought he wouldn't come." Ise Chumo laughed coldly, "I hope he doesn't come. He only knows how to put on airs, how much ability can he have?" Kaisai Hikaryuni also stood up and said softly, "You can't say that. On account of the enemy we should be united. Furthermore, although Yoshida-sama has a strange temper and is a little arrogant, he is still strong." Shichumo only laughed coldly and turned his head away, refusing to look at Yoshida Shinto. Shinko shook his head and sighed. While they were talking, Yoshida Shinto had already arrived at the top of the mountain with his followers. As soon as he arrived, he shouted at Ise Shinko, Kaisai Hikaryuni, and the others, "Gentlemen, what's the matter with these people?" As he said this, he pointed to the opposite side of the mountain range. At this time, many cultivators in the Chinese cultivation world had also put aside their prejudices and national grievances and rushed to Susumo. Although Ise Shinko, Kaisai Hikaryuni, and the others treated them with courtesy, there were dozens of Japanese cultivation sects in Susumo, and there were as many as thousands of cultivators. Naturally, not everyone had a good impression of the Chinese cultivators, even if they were here to help. Therefore, the cultivators of the Chinese sect of cultivation were also keenly aware of this. They chose to stay far away from these Japanese, and most of them stayed on the opposite side of the mountain range, forming a clear separation and minding their own business. Yoshida Shinto was obviously extremely dissatisfied with the decision of Ise Shinko, Kaisai Hikaryuni, and the others. It was not only because of Yoshida Shinto's unique theory, but more importantly, how could Yoshida Shinto not participate in such an important decision? Shinko looked at Yoshida Shinto and scolded him in his heart, "You old bastard. You didn't come to Mount Koya and Mount Longhu before. Now that you can't avoid it, you've come to question our decision. You're really hateful." But thinking about it, Ise Shinko still said politely, Mr. Yoshida, this is the result of our discussion. It's not enough to rely on the strength of the Japanese cultivation world to fight against the mystical silver fox. At this time, it's a good time to give up the views of sects and countries, Mr. Yoshida. Yoshida Shinto raised his head and laughed. Who said that? Look at my believers. The power of their pious faith will be the strongest weapon for us to defeat the mystical silver fox. As he spoke, he turned around and raised his arm to his believers, shaking the silver bell in his hand vigorously. In an instant, his believers all shouted fanatically. There was a strange light in their eyes, as if they would not blink even if they jumped into the sea of fire the next second. Yoshida Shinto laughed and said, "How is it? This kind of support and faith is truly indestructible, my lords. Who can compare with the only faith of Yoshida Shinto? Look at those Chinas. They are hiding far away like quails. They might as well dig a hole and bury themselves. Humph, in front of the enemy, there is no movement at all. I think they are already scared out of their wits." Se Shinko and Kaisai Hikaryuni looked at each other and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Just as they were about to speak, they suddenly saw another group of people coming from the stone road of the Stone of Slaughter. Although the number of people in this group was not as large as the believers of Yoshida Shinto, their voices were neat and their shouts were earth-shattering, which was quite imposing. For a moment the people on the mountain were curious. They didn't know where such a group of people had come from. The slogans were so loud that they were shouting. They listened curiously and saw them shouting, "Five Flowers Palm Sect, Supernatural Power, I am the only one in the world." It was Ding Nan, the leader of the Yin and Yang sect of Mount Wuhua. At this moment, the two Palm Sect members who loved to put on airs gathered together. Suddenly, Suyi became incomparably lively. When Yoshida Shinto, who was on the mountain, saw this, his face immediately darkened. His believers were also sensible and shouted at the top of their lungs. When Ding Nan's subordinates saw this, they thought, "Oh, there are Japanese people on the mountain who are challenging us? We may not be able to beat you in a fight of magic power, but we are not human when it comes to shouting loudly." Therefore, the believers of Mount Wuhua all shouted at the top of their lungs. Their voices were heart-wrenching, and their momentum was not inferior to that of others. The cultivators of various sects on the mountain all laughed in horror. They were all speechless and looked at the strange scene on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain with their mouths agape. It's a little late. Don't wait. Let's get up and watch it in the morning. Chapter 845. The older people in high positions were, the more they liked to put on airs. People like Yoshida Shinmuro were one of them. He had long been dissatisfied with Kaisai Hikaryuni and Ise Shinkuin's request for help from the Chinese cultivation world. He had secretly scolded the two of them for being traitors and traitors to the Japanese cultivation world. He had even angrily denounced the Chinese cultivators as robbers who took advantage of the burning house, saying that each of them had bad intentions and were despicable Chinese pigs. Along the way, it was not easy for him to hold back from cursing in front of Ise Shinkuin, Kaisai Hikaryuni, and the others. It could be considered as giving them face. Who would have thought that at this moment he would encounter someone who was trying to put on airs with him? If he could tolerate it, what could he not? If a person who was usually the most ostentatious met another person who was also ostentatious, then it was simply like a cat smelling fish. If they didn't compare and fight, then it would be more painful than killing them. Yoshida Shinmuro was enraged by the behavior of the Wuhua Mountain sect, but he was old, so he could still hide his anger. When his face darkened, the two deep lines on his cheeks revealed a sense of majesty and anger. As the saying goes, the kind of general, the kind of soldiers. It was the same for the cultivation sections. Like the master, like the disciple. When Yoshida Shinmuro became angry, his men became more and more frightened, and their shouts became louder. Ding Nan of the Wuhua Mountain sect was a person who would not lose even if she lost. Although she did not understand Japanese, she could hear the strong provocation in the other party's tone and voice. Ding Nan raised her eyebrows, and a trace of ridicule flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Song Guohua, who was beside her, was extremely adept at reading people. When he saw the movement of Ding Nan's eyebrows, he immediately understood her meaning. He immediately led his subordinates to shout themselves hoarse as they fought on the mountain once more. Their battle was like a battle on top of a mountain, with shouts ringing out. Neither side knew what the other was shouting, and in the end their voices were so loud that they didn't even know what they were shouting. They only knew that they had to overwhelm the other with their voices, or else they would lose face and dignity. All the sects in the Japanese cultivation world looked at each other. They wanted to dissuade him, but they did not know what to say to the stubborn old man. Meanwhile, the Chinese cultivators on the other side of the mountain also did not know whether to laugh or cry. An old man of the Chuanjian dragon sect with white eyebrows and a beard spoke in Shandong dialect. He asked Du Fei with a puzzled expression, "Little Du, which sect is that at the foot of the mountain? Why haven't I seen this sect before? What are they shouting about?" This old man was a senior member of Chuanjian dragon sect. His name was Zhou Fachang, and his Taoist title was Yuan Yang Jinren. He was a little older than Zhang Jishuan. In the sect, even the leader of dragon sect had to greet him respectfully. As soon as he asked this question, Du Fei, who was in charge of almost all the external affairs of Chuanjian dragon sect and had great power, had to bow respectfully and say, "Grandmaster, this is the Yin Yang sect of Mount Wuhua." Zhou Fachang could not help but feel surprised. He reached out and pulled his beard, looking as if he had seen a ghost. "The leader of their sect is Zheng Yuan, isn't it? Zheng Yuan didn't do this before." Zhou Fachang was already very old and much older than Zhang Jishuan. He was now 138 years old. Although Zheng Yuan was also an old man in his 50s or 60s, when he stood in front of Zhou Fachang, he really looked like a tender baby. There were two thunder tribulations in Chuanjian dragon sect. One was the leader of Chuanjian dragon sect, and the other was the only remaining senior member, Zhou Fachang. At present they were here to conquer the mystical silver fox. Because they were abroad, it was not suitable for the leader of Chuanjian dragon sect to come. Moreover, Chuanjian dragon sect was a very powerful sect in China. Once the leader of Chuanjian dragon sect moved, it would be very eye-catching. It was difficult for him to keep a low profile. As soon as Zhou Fachang arrived, with his seniority and cultivation, the cultivators of all sects in China all greeted him with courtesy. They faintly respected him and obeyed his orders. At this time, there were also cultivation sects such as the Maoshan sect next to Du Fei. Although the Chinese cultivators fought fiercely behind closed doors, they were quite able to unite when they went out of the country. At least on the surface they were harmonious. Although the northern and southern Taoism sects were at odds with each other, Mao Yichang of the Maoshan sect was also very respectful of Zhou Fachang. At this time, when she heard his words, she took the initiative to say, "Senior Zhou, you don't know this. Zheng Yuan died a long time ago, and now his disciple succeeded him." Zhou Fachang couldn't help but be stunned. He had been in seclusion for more than 10 years, so he didn't know that the outside world had undergone great changes. At this time he couldn't help but sigh. "Alas, I said that this boy had evil intentions. If he didn't take the right path, I'm afraid he wouldn't end up well. Now it seems that it's true. Alas, the Yin Yang sect of Mount Wuhua was at least like a sect in his hands. Now it has fallen into the hands of these ignorant children. It's really improper and outrageous." Most of the old people were more traditional. Seeing that the noise at the foot of the mountain was really outrageous, Zhou Fachang couldn't stand it anymore. He turned to Du Fei and said, "Little Du, hurry down and tell them to stop quarreling. What are they doing? They're not shouting at the market. They've disgraced themselves in country art, don't they feel ashamed?" Du Fei also had the same intention. After responding, he immediately leaped up and came in front of Ding Nan and the others, trying to persuade them in every possible way. Although Ding Nan was stubborn and hot-tempered, she was not an unreasonable person. Originally, she just wanted to fight with these Japanese and she had no other intentions. Moreover, at this time her subordinates were few in number. After shouting for a while, their throats were sore like broken gongs, and their voices were hoarse and unpleasant. Their momentum was greatly weakened. At this time, when she heard Du Fei say so, she took the opportunity to roll on the slope and quit while she was ahead. However, she still had to say some polite words. Ding Nan said to Du Fei, "Jinren Du, I stopped because of the Chuanjian dragon sect, not because I'm afraid of these Japanese." Du Fei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Seeing that the beautiful and tall Mount Wuhua sect in front of him was so proud, he said repeatedly, "Yes, yes, sect leader LV is young and promising. Of course, I won't lower myself to the same level as these Japanese." When Ding Nan heard him call her sect leader LV, she knew that the cultivation world still regarded her as Zheng Yuan's disciple, LV Fengping. Her face didn't change. She smiled slightly and said, "Jinren Du, let's go." Du Fei led her to the top of the mountain where the Chinese cultivators were gathered. As soon as they reached the top of the mountain, she saw an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion standing in the middle of the crowd. He was looking at her with a pair of bright eyes. When her eyes met the old man's, her heart immediately skipped a beat, as if she had been hammered by someone. The shock made her a little restless. After Ding Nan's cultivation had been successful, she had become extremely conceited. She really had the impression of looking down on the world and the cultivators in the world. At this time when she met Zhou Fachang, she was immediately shocked by his ordinary gaze. This made her feel very shocked and she thought, who is this person? How can he be so powerful? I wonder who is more powerful, Li Yundong or him. Ding Nan cultivated the yin and yang qi of heaven and earth, so her aura was integrated with everything in the world. It was difficult to detect the strength of her aura. Zhou Fachang couldn't see it from afar. He only felt that this little girl was acting recklessly and losing the face of the Chinese cultivation world for the sake of showing off. He wanted to give her a show of strength, but when he tested her, he found that Ding Nan's eyes were not only sharp, but also not at a disadvantage under his stare. She even seemed to be fighting back. Zhou Fachang was shocked. He hurriedly stepped forward and couldn't help asking, "What's your name? Is your master Zheng Yuan?" At this time, Du Fei was also introducing Zhou Fachang's identity and origin to Ding Nan in a low voice. Ding Nan's heart skipped a beat. She bowed to Zhou Fachang and said, "I'm the sect leader of the Yin and Yang sect of Mount Wuhua. Nice to meet you, Senior Zhou." Ding Nan was very cunning. She wanted to recover her real name one day and hold her head high. Therefore, she deliberately hid her name so as not to leave something to talk about in the future. Zhou Fachang didn't know what she was thinking. He just stared at her with wide eyes and an incredulous look on his face. "Little girl, how old are you? Are you really Zheng Yuan's disciple?" Ding Nan smiled slightly and said, "Senior Zhou, I just turned 20. Zheng Yuan is indeed my master." According to the habits and etiquette of cultivators, it was extremely impolite to call one's master by his name on such a formal occasion. Although some of the cultivators nearby frowned secretly, they didn't delve into this detail because it was unusual. Zhou Fachang's cultivation was extremely high, and he only had eyes for all things in the world. Naturally, he would not pay attention to the little thoughts of these people in the ghost domain. He pulled his beard hard and sighed, "Amazing, really amazing. At such a young age he has already cultivated to the Jinshin phase. It's really commendable." Mao Yichang, who was standing to one side, couldn't help but say unhappily, "What's so special about that?" Zhou Fachang looked back at her and shook his head. "You are an inner disciple and you have been indoctrinated since you were a child. The little girl in front of you obviously became a monk halfway through. The difference in cultivation conditions is like heaven and earth. How can you compare?" Mao Yichang was proud and arrogant. Even though she had suffered a setback in Mount Longhu, she had only fought with her opponent and had not hurt her self-confidence. When she heard Zhou Fachang's words in public, she suddenly blushed and looked at Ding Nan angrily. "Why can't I compare? I don't believe that a monk halfway through becoming a monk can be better than me. As the saying goes, different elements attract, similar elements repel. Wanting two proud and arrogant, beautiful and powerful women to peacefully coexist together, that is as difficult as ascending to heaven." Ding Nan had been with Zhou Qin for a long time, and she had always been suppressed by her to the point of feeling inferior. At this time when she turned over, this inferiority complex had turned into conceit and even arrogance, so that she was also a person who couldn't stand it. Ding Nan suddenly raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "I'm a monk halfway through, of course. I can't compare with this righteous younger sister. However, it's easy to say who is stronger and who is weaker. Won't you know after a fight?" Her words were like throwing a fire into a pot of oil, immediately arousing Mao Yichang's arrogance. She immediately jumped out and sneered. "Well, today let me have a taste of the Yin and Yang sects of Mount Wuhua." At this time, the cultivators of all sects in the Chinese cultivation world were in a panic. What was going on? The mystical silver fox hadn't made a move yet, and they were going to fight among themselves? No way. At this time, in the hotel near the Killing Stone scenic area, the mystical silver fox was lying leisurely under the eaves of the wooden corridor and sleeping. At this time it was raining heavily. The rain fell on the roof of the black-tiled house, flowed down the slope and gathered in the groove of the eaves. It was like a row of pearls that kept falling, which was very beautiful. The mystical silver fox was lying behind the bead curtain, resting lazily. Lu Feier, who was beside her, covered her ears and said to the mystical silver fox with a grimace, "Senior mystical silver fox, it's so noisy. How can you fall asleep?" Although Ding Nan's side had already left, the cultivators of Yoshida Shinto were obviously unwilling to rest. They were still shouting and shouting. Their voices were so loud that Lu Feier, who was at the foot of the mountain, couldn't bear it. However, the mystical silver fox didn't even raise her eyelids. A faint smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. It's just a group of wild dogs barking wildly. Why bother with them? Lu Feier's ears were bombarded by these people, and she felt her heart beating fast. She couldn't help saying, "But, aren't you the mystical silver fox? How can you let them be so presumptuous in front of you?" When the mystical silver fox heard this, she opened her eyes slightly and turned her head to look at the mountain range behind her. Then she said slowly, "Not all the people are here yet. Don't worry. Wait until they are all here." At this time, Su Yi had gathered nearly 1,500 people in the cultivation world of China. Among them, the lowest cultivation quotient was a yang spirit master. In front of such a large group of cultivators, ordinary people would be scared to the point that their feet would go soft. However, the mystical silver fox treated them as if they were nothing. It seemed that as long as she made a move, these people would immediately turn into ashes. But she had confidence, but Lu Feier didn't. She had seen these people slowly increase in the past 2 days. The mystical silver fox could win against 10 or 100, but what about 1,000? Lu Feier complained in her heart. She didn't know how to persuade her. But at this time she heard an earth-shattering cry coming from the mountain. It was a burst of Japanese. She didn't understand these Japanese, but the mystical silver fox had been lurking beside the Emperor of Bird Feather for many years. Her Japanese was more fluent than many Japanese. She heard these words clearly. The voice was shouting, "The mystical silver fox is ugly in name but not in reality. She is as timid as a mouse." When the mystical silver fox heard this, she immediately flew into a rage. She sat up with a rub and raised her eyebrows. She shouted, "Dongying's clowns, do you think that I, the mystical silver fox, really can't kill people?" After that, his figure flashed and he rushed to the mountain with a murderous look. I thought that I could only write 1 chapter today. I still wrote 2 chapters. I'm so tired. I crawled to sleep. Chapter 846. While the Chinese cultivation world was having internal strife, the Japanese cultivation world was also on the verge of internal strife. The relationship between the sects in the Japanese cultivation world was more complicated than that of the Chinese cultivation world. Many sects could not coexist with each other. It could even be said that the cultivators of the 2 sects could not exist on the same planet at the same time. Once they met, something would definitely happen. Yoshida Shimura's domineering attitude made many Japanese cultivators very dissatisfied. Although Yoshida Shinto was quite powerful, there were also many powerful sects in Shinto. Among them, Yoshikawa Shinto and Suka Shinto were famous Shinto sects in Japan. These 2 major Shinto sects were deeply influenced by Zhu Shi's Neo-Confucianism in the Song dynasty. The founder of Yoshikawa Shinto, Yoshikawa Ueji, first studied under Ise Shinto, then under Yoshida Shinto. Finally, he absorbed Zhu Shi's Neo-Confucianism and founded Yoshikawa Shinto. Therefore, it was also called Neo-Confucianism Shinto. Another Shinto sect that was also influenced by Zhu Shi's Neo-Confucianism was similar to Yoshikawa Shinto. The founder, Yamazaki Saito, first became a monk, then returned to the secular world and became a Confucian. Like Yoshikawa Yuzu, he studied under Ise Shinto and Yoshida Shinto. Finally, he absorbed the ideas of Zhu Shi's Neo-Confucianism and founded Shinto. Both sects preached that the way of the monarch and his subjects is unchangeable. Respect the emperor, loyalty to the monarch, and righteousness. Although Japan pulled the emperor down from the altar after World War II, MacArthur did not completely tear off the emperor's mask in Japan. Therefore, the emperor was still a godlike existence in the eyes of many people in Japan. As a result, both sects had quite a large market and power in Japan. Although these 2 Shinto sects advocated Confucianism in the early days of the world's creation, it would be a big mistake to say that they were pro-China. These 2 sects had long evolved into extreme religions that advocated the divine right of the monarch, the Japanese divine kingdom, and other doctrines. Most of the cultivators were right-wingers and worshippers of the emperor. Their sect's priests, Masao Yoshikawa and Ryuichi Yamazaki, were the same as Yoshida Shinmura. They were all religious. However, what made them disgusted was not Yoshida Shinmura's attitude towards the Chinese cultivators, but the way Yoshida Shinmura spoke as if he was the boss. Masao Yoshikawa was a shriveled old man. He was extremely short, only about 1.5 m tall. Adding on his age, he looked like a dwarf. He raised his head and looked at the stage with an unfriendly gaze. He spoke in a strange tone, "Yoshida-kun, since when did you have the right to speak here?" Yamazaki Ryuichi also had a dark expression as he spoke. "What an imposing manner." Is the Yoshida Shinto only left with this display? The two of them represented an extremely large power in the Japanese Shinto. If they were to speak with one another, even Ise Shingguang and Ise Izumo would not dare to look down on them. However, Yoshida Shinmura glanced at them condescendingly, and threw his head back and laughed. Little brats, Yoshida Shinto and Chuka Shinto dare to be presumptuous in front of our Yoshida Shinto. 300 years ago, the founder of your sect was still a student of our Yoshida Shinto sect. As he spoke, he looked around and laughed loudly. His expression was disdainful and insufferably arrogant. The sect placed great importance on the relationship between master and disciple. Could be said that a teacher for a day is a father for life. In a sect like the Shinto that was extremely particular about ethics, the relationship between master and disciple was extremely important. It could be said that no matter how good your disciple was in the future, no matter how bad your master was, when they met, even if the master became your immediate superior, you would still have to respectfully kneel and kowtow. Such a relationship in Japan was equivalent to a relationship that could never be overturned. How could the descendants of the Yoshida faction and Chuka faction not be depressed? The Yoshida faction was once the teacher of the Yoshida faction and Chuka faction. Although this was a matter of 300 years ago, no matter how ancient it was still recorded in the history books of Japan. No one could change it. And this matter had always been the most taboo matter for the Yoshida faction and Chuka faction. If the great priest of the Yoshida faction was a great cultivator of virtue and prestige, it was not that they could not respectfully prostrate themselves. But with the face of Yoshida Shinmura, prostrate themselves on the ground and kowtow to him? They might as well commit seppuku. Because of this, everyone was aware of this point. But everyone was very careful to avoid this matter, and did their best not to provoke them. But when Yoshida Shinmura brought up this matter in front of everyone, Yamazaki Ryuichi and Yoshida Masao simultaneously flew into a rage. They spared no effort to drag Yoshida Shinmura down from the high platform. When the two of them moved, the entire mountain peak faintly trembled. Yoshida Shinmura was also somewhat flustered. He shrunk back and immediately said, "What are you guys doing? Did I say something wrong?" Yamazaki Ryuichi and Yoshida Masao became increasingly furious. They were so angry that they blew their beards and glared at him. "Baka, if you say such words in private, then so be it. But you say such words in front of us, in front of so many people. How do you expect us priests to behave? Aren't you trying to trick us into fighting you? What a fool." When the cultivators of the other sects saw that the three of them were about to fight because of a disagreement, the followers of the respective sects of the three sects also began to clamor. The sounds of cursing and roaring resounded through the sky on the mountain range. It was really livelier than before. They all felt a headache. Si Chuyun sneered with extreme disdain, and Isishenko also had a rare wry smile on his face. He hurriedly advised, "Everyone listen to me, listen to me. At present, not only is there a strong enemy like the mystical silver fox eyeing us covetously, but there are also Chinese cultivators watching us from the opposite side. We can't lose face in front of the Chinese people. Do you want the Chinese to laugh at us for not knowing etiquette?" Although Ise Chuyun was unruly, his cultivation and wisdom were famous in the Japanese cultivation world, and he was quite respected. As soon as he spoke, Yoshida Masao and Yamazaki Ryuichi also took the opportunity to step down and said angrily, "Koen, it's not that we don't know etiquette, but some people have gone too far." As they spoke, the two of them flicked their sleeves and walked into the depths of the crowd, as if they were disdainful of being associated with Yoshida Shinmura. Yoshida Shinmura looked at their backs as they left. He didn't feel that they were giving in at all. Instead, he felt that they were admitting defeat. Yoshida Shinmura became more and more complacent. He smiled disdainfully and said, "A group of cowards. They came so early, but they didn't dare to challenge the mystical silver fox. They shouted so hard at their former masters." As he spoke, he looked around as if he wanted to find those who wanted to make things difficult for him. However, his behavior was simply not like that of a normal person. In front of a great enemy, he still had the mood to fight with others. Others all regarded him as a lunatic. How could they be willing to pay attention to him? When Yoshida Shinmura saw that everyone was avoiding his eyes, he thought that he had convinced them with his virtue. He couldn't help but wave his fan proudly and say to his followers, "Everyone, let's let everyone see the power of our Yoshida Shinto." As he spoke, he waved his hand, pointed the silver bell in his hand to the foot of the mountain, and shouted, "The mystical silver fox is ugly in name only and as timid as a mouse." When the people around heard this, they were all shocked. Those who had fought with the mystical silver fox before wanted to rush over and cover his mouth. However, at this time, Yoshida Shinmura's subordinates all shouted at the foot of the mountain in unison. Their voices were uniform and shook heaven and earth. The cultivators of all the sects in Japan all looked pale and trembled all over. Especially Ise Shingguang, his face was livid. They had fought with the mystical silver fox. Naturally, they knew that in order to deal with a master like the mystical silver fox, there must be a top master at the front to slow her down. Otherwise, there would be no chance of winning. The mystical silver fox's spiritual power cultivation was far beyond ordinary people's imagination. Such a quality advantage was far from being offset by the quantity advantage. Before that, Tachibana Wakako and Abe Naoto had also called to tell them that they had successfully invited Wang Yuanshan. Therefore, they had been waiting for Wang Yuanshan's arrival these days. As soon as he arrived, they would besiege the mystical silver fox. However, Yoshida Shinmura's whims suddenly put their preparations in danger of collapse. When Yoshida Shinmura saw that everyone was like petrified wax, he thought that they were shocked by his momentum. He laughed proudly, waved the folding fan in his hand, pointed to a lush green pine on the top of the mountain, and said, "Everyone, let's go there to rest. Later watch me fight with the mystical silver fox." This pine tree was extremely dense. Even in a thunderstorm there was almost no rain. It was an excellent place to hide from the rain. Moreover, this place had a wide field of view and one could almost see everything around them. Therefore, Yoshida Shinmura took over the nest the moment he arrived. He didn't care if there were people there. He directly ordered his subordinates to carry him over. Yoshida Shinmura saw that his men were cursing, but he didn't see any reaction from the mystical silver fox. At this time, the masters of all the major sects in Japan had gathered here for a few days, but there was no movement. As soon as he arrived, he suppressed the mystical silver fox, which made him extremely proud. He sat under the pine tree, fanning himself as he looked around. He was truly immensely proud of himself. But just when he was complacent, a figure suddenly flew out from the foot of the mountain and appeared in front of the mountain in an instant. Although this person was slim and exquisite, the 7 golden fox tails dancing wildly behind her immediately scared the people on the mountain and made them shout, "Mystical silver fox! It's the mystical silver fox!" All of a sudden there was a commotion on the mountain. The cultivators of all the sects in Japan were as if they were facing a formidable enemy. All of them were extremely nervous. Yoshida Shinmura's whole body shook, and then his whole body tensed up. Although he was arrogant, he was not a complete fool. Since he dared to take the initiative to provoke the mystical silver fox, he must have some strength. Yoshida Shinmura hid one hand in his sleeve and held a string of talismans. They were that Amaterasu's sun-breaking talisman, golden light evil talisman, pure purification talisman, and other powerful Shintoism talismans. Moreover, the high platform he was sitting cross-legged on had a hidden magic circle. The reason why he had been doing this and refused to come down from the platform was that he wanted to use his body to cover this mobile magic circle. The strength of this magic circle was that it could double his spiritual power and the power of the talismans in his hand. Although the power of each talisman was amazing, it was not enough to kill the mystical silver fox. But if it was enhanced by the magic circle, it might not be so. Yoshida Shinmura's wishful thinking was not bad. He used the method of control to control the mystical silver fox. He was so nervous that his hands hidden in his sleeves were trembling. He knew that he only had one chance. As long as the mystical silver fox fell into his trap, he would be able to kill the mystical silver fox by himself. This would be a great feat that even Abe Taiko could not do. And he, Yoshida Shinmura, would become the greatest cultivator in the history of Japan and be recorded in history forever. I'm so tired that I can't even open my eyes. There's only one more time today. I'll make up for it tomorrow. Don't wait. Chapter 847. Yoshida Shinmura's plan could be said to be a complete deception. If he met anyone else here, he would probably fall into the trap. At this time, everyone indeed regarded him as a lunatic. Who would have thought that under his arrogant appearance, there was such a sinister intention? However, it was a pity that Yoshida Shinmura's opponent was not an ordinary person. He was facing the mystical silver fox, a big devil who had fought more times than ordinary people had eaten. The mystical silver fox stopped in midair with a face full of anger. Just as she was about to pounce on Yoshida Shinmura, she suddenly felt that an extremely terrible danger seemed to be coming at her. This was the unique feeling of a cultivator who had reached the top level of cultivation. Sometimes an ordinary person could be alert to the coming crisis, let alone some people who had undergone special cultivation. Shang Yunxiang, the master of Xingyi, had such an ability. Not only could he foresee danger, but when he was sleeping he would wake up immediately if someone else looked at him. Li Zhongshuan, the author of the book The Past Martial Arts World, had once cultivated under Shang Yunxiang's door. When he heard that he had this strange ability, he didn't believe it. He had tried it himself. When he passed by the door of his room, he quickly took a look at Shang Yunxiang, who was taking a nap. At this time Shang Yunxiang, who had his back to Li Zhongshuan, immediately woke up. Li Zhongshuan was extremely shocked after that and felt that it was incredible. After asking Shang Yunxiang said casually, "We practice Kung Fu and we practice this kind of ability." The martial arts world was the closest to the cultivation world. Sun Lutong, the former Tiger Head Junior Protector and the world's top master, was the only one who could be compared with him. It was said that Shang Yunxiang was a great master who had comprehended the true meaning and mystery of martial arts. Shang Yunxiang's realm was extremely mysterious. Others could not understand it, but in the hearts of martial arts masters and great cultivators, it was like a mirror. This was a kind of magical and mysterious realm that one had to cultivate to a certain level to feel. What Shang Yunxiang could do, there was no reason that the mystical silver fox, who was one of the most powerful devils in history, could not do it. The mystical silver fox suddenly stopped and looked at Yoshida Shinmura's sleeve. She had rich experience in fighting. She looked at Yoshida Shinmura's lower body and saw that he still dared to sit on the high platform without moving at all. She immediately understood everything. Even a reincarnated wisdom king wouldn't dare to be so arrogant. You're just a lowly priest of a shrine, yet you dare to be so presumptuous in front of me? The mystical silver fox couldn't help but sneer in her heart. How dare you use such a lowly trick on me? The mystical silver fox quickly came up with a plan to deal with it. While sneering, she quickly pinched her fingers and recited something softly. On the opposite side, Yoshida Shinmura saw that the mystical silver fox was floating in the air without moving at all, which made him even more nervous. He didn't know if the mystical silver fox had seen through his plan, so he shouted again, "Mystical silver fox, do you dare to come forward and fight with me?" The mystical silver fox didn't seem to hear him. She just stood there, pinching her fingers and moving her lips as if she was doing a spell. This time, Yoshida Shinmura became more and more flustered. If the mystical silver fox didn't come close, he wouldn't dare to release his talisman. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to guarantee the hit rate. Yoshida Shinmura gritted his teeth and pointed at the mystical silver fox on the high platform and scolded her. Seeing that the mystical silver fox didn't respond to such insults, his subordinates also dared to scold her. For a moment, the mountain was filled with filthy words like water, which was hard to stop. The cultivators of various sects in Japan on the mountain were all dumbfounded. Many of them didn't understand what was going on with the strange scene in front of them. Where did Yoshida Shinmura get the courage to point at the nose of the mystical silver fox and scold her like this? The mystical silver fox had gone up the mountain to kill because of their scolding. Why did it seem that she didn't hear them and didn't move at all? The mystical silver fox had been enraged by a sentence before, but at this time she was as calm as a rock. She stared at Yoshida Shinmura. Suddenly her wriggling red lips stopped. She held the 5 thunder fingers in her hand and pointed to the sky. Then she shouted, "Thunder!" Suddenly, a huge whirlpool appeared in the rolling dark clouds in the sky. With a loud crack, a bolt of lightning struck at Yoshida Shinmura in an instant. The skill of attracting thunder was the most powerful and difficult magic in the world. It was easy to attract a powerful bolt of thunder from the sky and accurately hit a person who was tens of thousands of feet above the ground. One could imagine how difficult it was. There were many cultivators who were not careful when attracting thunder, causing a backfire. A bolt of thunder struck them. Therefore, it could be said that the thunder-attracting skill was a spell that could kill 10,000 enemies and hurt 10,000 oneself. Even the mystical silver fox herself did not dare to say that she could accurately hit the target with every bolt of thunder. Therefore, since ancient times, the thunder skill was often a combination of 10,000 bolts of thunder, covering the ground to kill the opponent in seconds. However, at this time, the mystical silver fox had only attracted 1 bolt of thunder. Logically speaking, the hit rate could not be guaranteed, but Yoshida Shinmura was standing under a tall pine tree. Standing under a tree in this thunderous and rainy weather was something that a slightly normal person would not do. However, Yoshida Shinmura had his own difficulties. He could not move his position on the high platform. At this time it was raining heavily. Although he had used his spiritual power to prevent himself from being wet all the way, he was going to fight with the mystical silver fox. Naturally, he had to save every little bit of spiritual power to deal with the mystical silver fox. Of course, he was unwilling to waste his spiritual power on such a thing as blocking the rain. If he was drenched in the rain like this, the rain would enter his body, and the moisture would also enter his body, which would greatly affect the speed of the qi and blood in his body. Although the cultivation methods of the Chinese and Japanese cultivation worlds were different, the Japanese cultivators also relied on the qi and blood in their bodies to mobilize their spiritual power. Moreover, Yoshida Shinmura, like most Japanese cultivators, only cultivated their minds but not their lives. Naturally, their bodies could not reach the perfect state. The moisture could easily enter their bodies and affect them. Therefore, Yoshida Shinmura hid under the pine tree. Others only thought that he was complacent and courted death by standing under the tree. But only he knew that he was forced to do so. In order to plot against the mystical silver fox, it could be said that he had calculated every step, but he didn't expect that he would be harmed by a tree. With a loud bang, the heavenly thunder steadily struck down at the tree. Yoshida Shinmura was also a rare great cultivator in Japan. He was also sensitive to danger. He subconsciously wanted to dodge, but when he thought about it, he suddenly found that his whole body was numb. He looked down and saw that his whole body was wrapped in golden threads, which made him motionless. He didn't know when the mystical silver fox had done it, but it had entangled him in place. Yoshida Shinmura was horrified. He looked up and saw that the mystical silver fox's red eyes were staring at him ferociously, as if he had been stared at by the god of death. At this time, the cultivators of the various sects subconsciously shouted, "Hide!" The people who were closest to Yoshida Shinmura and had the ability to save him were Ryuichi Yamazaki and Masao Yoshikawa. The cultivation of these two people was not much different from that of Yoshida Shinmura. They were both rare masters in the Japanese cultivation world. However, the two of them had just been so angry with Yoshida Shinmura that their noses were almost crooked. At this time, seeing that he was arrogant and unlucky to die, they were too happy. How could they have the thought of saving him at the first time? When they came to their senses and felt that they should let go of their prejudices to save Yoshida Shinmura, the heavenly thunder had already struck Yoshida Shinmura's body. Everyone saw a white light in front of them, as if a giant bomb had exploded in front of them. A blazing aura rolled over, making them unable to help but close their eyes. When they opened their eyes again, they saw that there was a huge pit in the place where Yoshida Shinmura was. Everything within a diameter of 5 or 6 meters around him had disappeared. Yoshida Shinmura, the pine tree beside him, the high platform under him, and the believers who were carrying the high platform had all been turned into powder. Everyone was stunned. Yoshida Shinto was one of the most famous Shinto sects in Japan. Their great priest, Yoshida Shinmura, had been killed by the mystical silver fox as soon as they met. What a terrible thing this was. For a moment, some courageous cultivators were so scared that their legs trembled and their feces flowed out. However, the other believers of Yoshida Shinto were fanatics selected by Yoshida Shinmura. All of them had some cultivation and they were not afraid of death. When they saw this scene, they were not afraid to escape at first. Instead, after being stunned for a moment, they jumped up and pounced on the mystical silver fox like crazy, shouting hysterically for revenge. When the mystical silver fox saw them pouncing on her, she couldn't help snorting coldly and laughing angrily. "Courting death? Well, I'll fulfill your wish." As she spoke, she moved and rushed into the crowd. In an instant, there was a bloody storm on the mountain ridge. In an instant, these hundreds of people were all killed by the mystical silver fox. Their heads were rolling around on the mountain ridge and there were broken limbs everywhere. The cultivators of all sects in Japan seemed to be scared silly by the ferocity and cruelty of the mystical silver fox. There was not even a single person who could help. After the mystical silver fox killed the last fanatical disciple of Yoshida Shinto, she glanced at the top of the mountain where the Japanese were gathered. She saw that this group of people were all covered in dust. They were sitting on the mountain and watching the tigers fight. It seemed that they were not going to save them. She suddenly became more and more angry. There were two kinds of people that the mystical silver fox hated the most in her life. One was those who were ungrateful, and the other was those who did not save them. When she was chased by a group of experts led by the reincarnated Wisdom King, she had begged the reincarnated Wisdom King in private, hoping that he would let her go this time for the sake of their love. Unexpectedly, the reincarnated Wisdom King had a heart of stone and killed her. The mystical silver fox harbored a deep hatred in her heart. After she fled to Japan, she hid beside the Emperor of the Bird Feather to recuperate. Originally, she had a close relationship with Yasukin Abe, who often met the Emperor of the Bird Feather. The two of them often made tea and discussed the Tao. Unexpectedly, her identity was discovered by Yasukin Abe in the future. Later, she begged Yasukin Abe not to expose her. As a result, Yasukin Abe did not hesitate to expose her true face to the Emperor of the Bird Feather and led everyone to seal her. The mystical silver fox was so angry that she thought that Yasukin Abe did not save her and that the reincarnated Wisdom King was ungrateful. She swore that as long as she saw these two kinds of people, she would kill them. When the mystical silver fox saw the behavior of the Japanese people, after another round of killing, her heart was full of killing intent. She made up her mind and shouted angrily at the Japanese cultivators, "You are a group of beasts who don't want to save me. Why are you still alive?" With that, she let out a loud cry and plunged into the crowd in an instant. The fuse of Yoshida Shimura's scheme was completely ignited. At this time, Wang Yuanshan had not arrived yet. Li Yundong, who was far away in Tianan City, did not know what kind of earth-shattering event had happened to Su Yi. Chapter 848. The cultivators of various sects in Japan did not expect that the mystical silver fox would suddenly kill them, especially the two great priests of Yoshikawa Shinto and Suka Shinto. They did not expect that their momentary distraction would cause the killing intent of the mystical silver fox, which would cause a great disaster. None of them were weak. Any one of them would be a famous figure in the Chinese cultivation world. In particular, the status of the priest in Shintoism was high. It was equivalent to the position of the head of the Chinese cultivation sects, and it was also equivalent to the position of the chief monk of the Shingon Tantrism in Mount Koya. Usually, the cultivators who were qualified to inherit such positions had to cultivate to the realm of God. Although the great priests did not cultivate their lives, build the foundation or cross the thunder retribution, their strength could not be underestimated. They were equivalent to the thunder retribution masters in the country. Moreover, because their strength came from faith, the difficulty of cultivation was relatively low. It was not uncommon for talented people to have the strength equivalent to the thunder retribution masters at a young age. In the past 100 years, the Chinese mainland had been in turmoil, traditional culture had been destroyed, and there was a serious lack of faith. This had led to the destruction of almost all the cultivation soil and the loss of the cultural soil on which they relied for survival. The cultivation sects could not be replenished with fresh blood. The masters of the Chinese cultivation world were decreasing rapidly at an alarming rate. There were few Jinshin and even fewer thunder retribution masters. On the other hand, although the Japanese cultivation world had also experienced the war, the cultivation soil had not been destroyed. On the contrary, it had become more and more fertile. Up to now, Shintoism had become the #1 sect in Japan, with more than 100 million believers. With the support of such power of faith, in the past 100 years, the Japanese cultivation world had far more masters at the level of Jinshin and thunder retribution than the Chinese cultivation world. However, because their cultivation ideas and methods were like the national environment and national conditions of Japan, there were natural defects and bottlenecks. They could reach a very high level, but they could never reach the top. A powerful master at the level of thunder retribution had met the mystical silver fox and died as soon as they met. This would scare the courage of the cultivators in the world. When two people fought with each other, if their level was the same, they would fight for their morale. Whoever had a higher morale would have a greater chance of winning. When two forces fought with each other, no matter whether their level was the same or not, they would always fight for their morale. If their morale fell, it would be difficult for immortals to save them. Even if Buddha was reborn, it would be difficult for him to save them. After a bolt of lightning struck down, the morale of the Japanese cultivators almost fell to the lowest point. Many of the Japanese cultivators here had been frightened by the mystical silver fox before. At this time, seeing that Yoshida Shimura was killed by the lightning in an instant, they were so shocked that they wanted to turn around and run away. At this time, Ise Shingguang, Ise Izumo, and Kaisai Hikaryuni had all played the role of a great cultivator. Without saying a word, Ise Izumo immediately summoned Amaterasu to the mortal world and pounced on the mystical silver fox. Ise Grand Shrine was the highest national shrine in Japan. It was the shrine dedicated to the supreme god of Japan, Amaterasu Great God. Before Masako Tachibana merged with Jinyan Tantrism, the Japanese cultivation world was undoubtedly ruled by the cultivators of Ise Shinto. Although Ayase Izumo was known as the number 2 in the Japanese cultivation world, it was because she had been suppressed by Masako Tachibana in the previous fight, which made many Japanese people sigh with emotion. Since Yu Yu was born, how could Liang be born? Ayase Shrine was the highest national shrine in Japan. It was a shrine dedicated to the supreme god of Japan, Amaterasu. At this time she summoned the gods to the world. Everyone saw an extremely dazzling woman standing on the mountain. This woman's whole body was shining. Only from her slim figure and exquisite curves could they tell that she was a woman. Amaterasu was the sun god of Japan and also the god with the highest status. She was holding a sword in her hand. The sword was surrounded by fierce flames, which caused the air around her to twist violently. Every time she took a step forward, the ground would ignite with blazing flames, as if there was fire under her feet, and the road she walked was like a burning path. Amaterasu was the Japanese sun god and also the god with the highest status. She was holding a sword in her hand, which was surrounded by fierce flames, which caused the air around her to twist violently. Every time she took a step forward, the ground would ignite with blazing flames, as if there was fire under her feet, and the road she walked was like a burning path. The Amaterasu summoned by Ayase Chuyun stopped in front of the mystical silver fox, and immediately blocked the momentum of the mystical silver fox. At this time Ayase Xingguang immediately shouted at the panicked crowd, "Everyone don't panic. Whether you live or die, it's right in front of you. If you escape you will die. If you fight you will still have a chance to live. Everyone, Amaterasu is looking at us. Even if we are no match for her, let us die gloriously here." Ayase Xingguang was usually careless and acted like a free man. But at this time, his words were solemn and stirring, which immediately stopped the people of Shintoism. They were all loyal believers of Shintoism, but they were frightened by the mystical silver fox for a while, and no one stood up to lead them. At this time someone shouted and they immediately came to their senses. Shame and anger surged in their hearts at the same time, and their blood was boiling. Kaisai Hikaryuni, who was standing to one side, also shouted to the monks of Jinyin Tantrism behind him, "Amitba! Everyone, today is the day to subdue the demons. We cultivators worship Buddha and believe in the Great Way. Why should we care about our skin? If we die in battle, Buddha will lead us to the Western paradise. Life is short like a morning. At this time, in the face of a great disaster, we should sacrifice our lives for righteousness." There were people in charge of Shintoism and there were also people in Buddhism. At this time these monks also calmed down. One by one they bowed their heads and chanted the name of Buddha. Their eyes were high and their expressions were heroic. "Amitba, we will obey the order." When Kaisai Hikaryuni saw that everyone had finally settled down and their morale had finally been restored, he immediately felt relieved, and then he shouted excitedly, "Formation!" Jinyin Tantrism was one of the 3 giants of Buddhism in Japan. Its Buddhism power ranked second in Japan, and it was not far from the number 1 power, Ayase Shinto. Although he had lost to Li Yundong in a fight and lost the throne of Mao Tianwang, the number 1 expert in the cultivation world of Japan, a centipede would not die. There were tens of millions of believers in Jinyin Tantrism, and there were many young spirit masters among them, who had strong potential and formations. Although he had been killed by the mystical silver fox and his strength had been greatly damaged, as the saying goes, Buddhism in India, Dharma in China, and Buddhist monks in Japan, Japan lacked everything but monks. In the past few days, Jinyin Tantrism immediately made up for it. As soon as Kaisai Hikaryuni shouted, hundreds of monks of Jinyin Tantrism quickly formed a formation. On the other side, the monks of the Tiantai sect and the Pure Land sect also reacted quickly. They formed a formation one after another. For a time, the sound of Buddha's name on the top of the mountain shook heaven and earth. It was majestic and brilliant, and there seemed to be a Buddha's spiritual light in the air. Although the mystical silver fox was extremely fast, Ayase Chuyun was risking her life at this time and attacking with all her might. Because she knew that if she didn't use all her strength in an instant to stop the mystical silver fox, the Japanese cultivation world would completely collapse. Even if the Chinese cultivation world wanted to save them, there was nothing they could do. Moreover, after this battle, the mystical silver fox would not give them another chance. Therefore this time it was a matter of life and death. Ayase Chuyun's attack was exactly in front of the mystical silver fox. The long sword slashed in front of her, and immediately a blazing wall of fire was ignited in front of her. This wall of fire almost connected the sky and the earth, blocking the mystical silver fox. The figure of the mystical silver fox paused. If she had the real body of the divine fox at this time, she only needed to show her real body and hit the wall of fire with her invulnerable and invincible body. Then the magic would be easily broken by her. However, at this time the mystical silver fox only had 7 tails. She was not afraid of any magic treasures. The other parts of her body were all rosy. If she bumped into the wall of fire, she might be burned to powder immediately, leaving only 7 tails. The mystical silver fox's eyes narrowed, but she soon sneered, "Can you stop me like this? Childish." The 7 tails behind her twisted quickly and kept growing longer and larger. Originally, the tail was only more than 1 meter long, but now it was more than 100 meters long. From a distance, the 7 golden tails danced like a golden whirlwind. In an instant there was a strong wind between heaven and earth. The 7 golden tails behind the mystical silver fox danced wildly. They were so fast that their shadows could hardly be seen. The strong wind around them was like a knife. Even if a hard rock was placed in it, it would definitely be cut into countless pieces in an instant. At first, the strong wind produced by the 7 golden tails of the mystical silver fox made the wall of fire more and more vigorous. But not long after, the wind became more and more fierce. The huge rocks at the foot of the mountain were blown away in all directions, and the big trees on the top of the mountain were uprooted. The wall of fire became weaker and weaker. When the power of the wall of fire was half of what it had been before, the 7 huge tails behind the mystical silver fox suddenly slapped towards the wall of fire. With a bang, the wall of fire was completely extinguished in an instant. Amaterasu, who was holding the blazing fire sword, was also smashed into pieces and disappeared. Si Chuyun spat out a mouthful of blood and fell down on his back without saying a word. The mystical silver fox laughed wildly and said, "How dare you show off your insignificant skills?" After that, her figure flashed and she rushed into the crowd of cultivators from various sects in Japan without any hindrance. At this time, the cultivators of various sects finally got a precious chance to breathe because of Si Chuyun's desperate stop. They were already ready for battle. When they saw the mystical silver fox pouncing on them, they all shouted and rushed toward the mystical silver fox regardless of their own safety. For a moment, the mountains and the Shuya Killing Stone scenic area were dark. There were magic treasures flying everywhere, and all kinds of magic arts emerged one after another. Although the mystical silver fox was in the magic circles of various Buddhist sects, she was not afraid at all. She ignored the magic circles as if they were nothing. She killed in and out of them, covered in blood, but not a single drop of blood was her own. At this time, on the opposite mountain ridge, the cultivators of various sects in China, who were about to fight among themselves, were stunned by the sudden change in front of them. Although Du Fei, who had been trying to persuade them to fight, was not at a high cultivation level, his eyesight was quite good. He fixed his eyes on the opposite mountain and immediately blurted out, "Oh no, these Japanese are going to be in trouble. They can't hold on for long." Mao Yuchang and Ding Nan, who had been staring at each other, also looked at each other unconvinced and looked at each other. Zhou Fachang, who was beside them, looked at them with a serious face and said, "The mystical silver fox has made a move." Du Fei said worriedly, "Grandmaster, but Jinren Wang Yuanshan hasn't arrived yet." Zhou Fachang said in a deep voice, "We can't wait for him any longer. If we wait for him any longer, all the Japanese will die. It doesn't matter if they all die. The mystical silver fox will come to deal with us later." Although the Chinese cultivators here didn't like the Japanese, they still understood the principle that the teeth were cold when the clan died. They all took out their powerful magical weapons and were ready to grit their teeth and go forward. To fight with the mystical silver fox, they not only needed great strength but also great courage, because it was very likely that they would be killed by the mystical silver fox before they could even react, and they would disappear from the world from then on. Zhou Fachang was well aware of this. The reason why he volunteered to lead the team here was that he wanted to leave more seeds for the Chinese cultivation world, which had suffered many disasters. He looked back at the crowd and shouted in a dignified manner, "You are not allowed to go. Stand aside and watch for me. I'll go." His cultivation level was the highest here. Compared with him, everyone's cultivation level was much lower. Zhou Fachang said that he was standing by, but in fact he was taking care of their faces and didn't want them to die. When the crowd heard this, many of them looked indignant and unwilling, while many of them secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Zhou Fachang stretched out his hand, and a long sword appeared in his hand like a magic trick. In an instant, his body turned into a long rainbow and flew toward the mystical silver fox. Although everyone listened to Zhou Fachang and didn't follow him, Ding Nan felt that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to stand out. She was a newborn calf who was not afraid of tigers. How could she know the horror of the mystical silver fox? She immediately volunteered to follow him. Before leaving, she didn't forget to stab Mao Yuchang. "Hey, I'm a half-baked person. I won't fall behind others. You're a decent person. Do you dare to follow me?" Mao Yuchang was a woman who couldn't stand being teased. She immediately flew into a rage and raised her eyebrows. "Why wouldn't I dare?" After that, she moved faster than Ding Nan and rushed to Zhou Fachang's side in a flash. Everyone don't wait. I'll make up for the second update tomorrow morning. I'm going to bed. Chapter 849. Zhou Fachang saw a flash of green light beside him, and Mao Yuchang of the Maoshan sect appeared in front of him. The old elder of the Chuanjin dragon sect was shocked. He immediately stopped and shouted, "Nonsense, what are you doing here?" Mao Yuchang quickly glanced at Ding Nan, who was not far away. She straightened her neck and said, "I've been cultivating since I was a child. Is it just to become an immortal? In the face of a great disaster, if we cultivators don't step forward bravely, what can we do?" Her words were dignified. Even Zhou Fachang was choked and didn't know what to say. However, he was old and shrewd. He could see through it at a glance. In fact, it was just a fight between girls. She was only in her early 20s now. She was in her 3rd or 4th year of university. She was young and in her prime. She was also the most proud and arrogant age. When she lost her temper, even the heavenly god wouldn't buy it, let alone the mystical silver fox. Moreover, just now, the mystical silver fox had killed a master at the level of thunder retribution with a bolt of heavenly thunder. They were far away, so they didn't see clearly who had been killed. Even if they saw clearly, they didn't know what kind of status and strength Yoshida Shinura had in the Japanese cultivation world. The ignorant were fearless. Although Mao Yuchang was a good cultivator and was not inferior to Zi Yuan in terms of erudition, she knew nothing about the Japanese cultivation world. She thought that the mystical silver fox had just killed a cat or dog, a nobody. Mao Yuchang didn't know the details, and Ding Nan, who had become a monk halfway, didn't know how powerful it was. The reason why Zhou Fachang didn't want them to come out was that he felt that both of them were rare talents in the Chinese cultivation world. It was rare and commendable for them to have such cultivation at such a young age. He wanted to leave more seeds and vitality for the Chinese cultivation world. However, these two little girls were disappointing. At this time they were fighting. Zhou Fachang looked at the two little girls who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He was so angry that he blew his beard and glared at them. But at this time it was very inappropriate for them to go back. Moreover, even if they survived in the future, they would be very sad, and it would even affect their future cultivation. Zhou Fachang stamped his feet and glared at them. He wanted to scold them, but he forced himself to hold back. He had to hold back his anger and said, "You two stay behind me later. Don't act rashly. Otherwise, you can't blame me if your body and soul are destroyed." After that, the long sword in his hand shook, and he let out a long roar. He said loudly, "Mystical silver fox, do you recognize the sword in my hand?" Although his voice was a bit old, it was still loud and clear. His shout echoed throughout the world, and was clearly transmitted into the mountain range opposite of them, which was filled with killing intent. When the mystical silver fox heard this, her heart skipped a beat, and she couldn't help but have some distracting thoughts. She subconsciously looked back, and suddenly, the Japanese cultivation world immediately had precious time to breathe. In an instant they worked together, and countless magic arts and magic treasures were blasted at the mystical silver fox. This time the counterattack was shockingly powerful. From afar, a wave of colorful light surged towards the mystical silver fox, like a raging wave that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. The reason why the silver fox had been able to suppress the Japanese cultivation world was that she had always relied on her speed to be faster than theirs. As the saying goes, one step faster, all the steps faster. Even the strong magic array set up by the Buddhist cultivators on the mountain ridge could not slow her down. Even the countless magic treasures and magic arts around her could not distract her at all. However, as soon as Zhou Fachang lit up the sword in his hand, a very familiar aura immediately came. The silver fox was shocked. After a thought, her body was a little sluggish and her speed slowed down a little. It was this point that made the Japanese cultivation world finally catch up and fight back. Although the mystical silver fox was strong, she did not dare to face so many magic treasures and magic arts with her body. The 7 golden tails behind her suddenly rolled up in front of her, like a golden barrier wall, blocking in front of her. There was an earth-shaking sound, and countless magic treasures and magic arts were bombarded on the 7 golden fox tails. Even the mystical silver fox's tail was invulnerable to water and fire, and it was not afraid of any magic treasures, but it could not bear it. It was dented, and the mystical silver fox was forced to retreat again and again, out of the mountain ridge. The silver fox was floating in the air, looking a little angry. With a fierce flick of her 7 fox tails, the barrier instantly turned into a steel whip. She whipped at the mountain, and with a bang she whipped at the Japanese cultivators. She was like a giant smashing an ant on a mountain with a hammer. When the cultivators of various sects in Japan saw the 7 golden fox tails above their heads smashing down, they all shouted loudly. The chanting of the Buddhist cultivators was even louder, and many huge Vajrayakshas flew out of the magic circle. These Vajrayakshas were all Buddhist gods. Although they resisted the overwhelming attack with a bang, many monks could not stand the fierce shock. They were slapped so hard that the chi and blood in their chests were rolling. They spat out blood and fell to the ground. Fortunately, there were many monks. Some of them fell down, and someone immediately came forward to drag them away. Almost in the next second, someone made up for them so that the magic circle could continue to be maintained. The mystical silver fox just wanted to vent her anger and to prevent the other party from counterattacking. As expected, after her smash, the cultivators of various sects in Japan on the mountain were a little quiet and did not dare to continue to attack. They were afraid that the mystical silver fox would attack them a few more times. If they were not smashed to death, they would be shocked to death by the rebound force caused by the collision between the spiritual power. Seeing that they had become much more obedient, the mystical silver fox turned her head and looked at Zhou Fachang unkindly. Her blood-red eyes swept up and down for a while, and finally fell on the sword in Zhou Fachang's hand. The long sword was about 2 feet and 3 inches long and 4 inches wide. The body of the sword was full of patterns, more like runes and subtle magic circles. Other than that, there was nothing special about it. At first glance, ordinary people could not recognize what kind of sword it was. However, the mystical silver fox's eyes narrowed. She instantly remembered that when she was besieged by people in China, there were several powerful magical weapons that left a deep impression on her body. The sword in front of her was one of them. The mystical silver fox slowly turned around and turned her back to the cultivators of the Japanese cultivation world. When the cultivators of various sects in Japan saw that the mystical silver fox was so arrogant, as if she had nothing to fear and regarded them as nothing, they were all furious. However, they wanted to attack from behind, but they saw the 7 golden fox tails behind the mystical silver fox hanging upside down in the air like a waterfall. Although they looked calm, they could vaguely see that they had been eager to have a try, as if they were staring at them covetously. In the next second they would smash the sky and the earth again. The mystical silver fox's voice was cold. She stared at the sword in Zhou Fachang's hand and said, "Is this the immortal trapping sword?" Zhou Fachang was old and shrewd. With a simple sentence he solved the problem of the Japanese cultivation world. He gently shook the long sword in his hand, and suddenly the immortal trapping sword disappeared in his hand. He said in a long voice, "You have good eyesight. It is indeed the immortal trapping sword." As soon as she heard the name of the immortal trapping sword, Ding Nan didn't understand it because she entered the sect late. However, Mao Yuchang suddenly trembled and looked at Zhou Fachang with her eyes wide open. She knew that there were 5 famous swords in the Taoist cultivation world. The top one was the personal magic weapon of the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan, which was used to kill the 2 ancient fierce gods, Xingtian and Qiyu. The next ones were the Sanhuang sword, the 4 immortal killing swords, the 7-star sword, and the 8 wilds and 6 swords. The 4 immortal killing swords were forged by the ancient Taoist ancestor Hongjun with the essence of 5 metals, smelted with the fire of the earth's core, quenched with the water of the cold pool, and then used 81 kinds of extreme poisons in the world to nourish its fierce qi. 81 kinds of rare spiritual medicines to nourish its spiritual qi. When it came out of the furnace, it even made the genuine immortals die with the sword. Later, Hongjun passed on the 4 swords, namely the immortal killing sword, the immortal killing sword, the immortal trapping sword, and the immortal slashing sword to his disciple, sect leader Tong Tian of the Jie school. With the help of these 4 swords, sect leader Tong Tian formed the immortal killing formation and fought against the Yuanshi Qianzuan, Taishang Laojun, Amitabha and Patriarch Bodhi alone. The power of these magic weapons could be imagined. These 4 swords each had their own magical uses. The immortal killing sword specialized in killing the soul and yang spirit of a cultivator, the immortal killing sword specialized in killing the body of a cultivator, the immortal trapping sword specialized in killing the wisdom and spiritual consciousness of a cultivator, and the immortal slashing sword specialized in cutting off a cultivator's escape route. Therefore, in the Chinese cultivation world at that time, it was said that once the four swords appeared, they would be invincible in the world. No matter if one was a celestial immortal or a Vajra Arhat, as long as one was in the sword formation of the four immortal killing swords, there was no way to go to heaven, no way to enter the earth, no way to save them, and no way to save them. However, because the four immortal killing swords had to be combined to be extremely powerful, it was ranked behind the Sanhuang sword. Otherwise, with the power of the four immortal killing swords, if the four swords were combined, the power would not be inferior to that of the Shenyuan sword. Even when the mystical silver fox had the real body of the heavenly fox, although she was immune to almost all magic arts and magic treasures, she was still quite afraid of these 5 magic swords. Fortunately, the Shenyuan sword and the 4 immortal killing swords had long been lost. Otherwise, as soon as the 4 immortal killing swords appeared, she would immediately have to flee. Although the mystical silver fox was conceited, she would never think that she was stronger than the 3 religions and 4 saints combined. When she saw that Zhou Fachang was holding the immortal trapping sword that had hurt her 1,000 years ago, she immediately became very vigilant. She couldn't help looking around as if there was no trace of the immortal trapping sword in the world. Zhou Fachang knew that his cultivation was not as good as that of the mystical silver fox, so he used psychological warfare to deal with her. This psychological warfare could not be used casually. If he hadn't had the immortal trapping sword of the 4 immortal killing swords in his hand, which made her very afraid, she would have slapped herself to death. When Zhou Fachang saw that the mystical silver fox was hesitating as expected, he knew that his plan had succeeded. He said loudly, "Mystical silver fox, since you know this sword, why don't you surrender?" As the saying goes, an old man who doesn't die is a thief. Zhou Fachang was as cunning as a thief. Every word he said was provocative and heart-wrenching. In the eyes of others, the mystical silver fox was afraid that she would have killed someone at this time. However, he made the mystical silver fox more and more vigilant and did not dare to act rashly. Zhou Fachang saw that she was standing there with a gloomy face. Her eyes flickered and she looked around. He said, "Mystical silver fox, if you don't surrender now, you will have practiced your spiritual energy cultivation for 1,000 years in vain." The mystical silver fox narrowed her eyes. She was not angry but shocked. Seeing Zhou Fachang's fearless look, she was suspicious in her heart. But after all, she was not an ordinary person. It was impossible for her to surrender to Zhou Fachang with a few words. The mystical silver fox's heart moved slightly, and her suspicious face suddenly became ferocious. Her body moved and her fingers were like hooks. In an instant she appeared in front of Zhou Fachang and said sternly, "Old thing, how dare you lie to me?" Zhou Fachang had been staring at the mystical silver fox with vigilance. When a bad omen flashed in his heart, his body immediately moved and disappeared. As soon as he disappeared, the mystical silver fox tore the shadow of his body into pieces. If he waited for the figure of the mystical silver fox to disappear and then dodged, he was afraid that his body and soul would have been destroyed at this time. As soon as the figure of the mystical silver fox moved, countless swords appeared between heaven and earth in an instant. They rushed towards the mystical silver fox like a storm. This was the immortal trap formation of the 4 immortal swords. Chapter 850. Zhou Chang was old and experienced. With a few words he led the mystical silver fox into the trap. Everyone saw the sword light shooting in all directions in the sky and the sword chi soaring into the sky. The light and shadow of the immortal trapping sword were everywhere, but the real body of the immortal trapping sword could not be seen anywhere. Although the mystical silver fox was extremely fast, she could not escape from the overwhelming sword shadows. At this time her body was almost invisible. There were strong winds and sword chi everywhere. It was so cold that it made people's hair stand on end. Ordinary people only felt that if they were in it, they would be pierced by thousands of swords and killed in an instant. At this time, the cultivators of various sects in Japan on the other side of the mountain could only widen their eyes at this time. This was the first time for many of them to see this kind of ancient magic weapon. They were all stunned and almost speechless. Si Chuyin looked at the sword chi dancing wildly in the sky. The mystical silver fox had been so arrogant before, but it was so suppressed that her figure disappeared. She could only vaguely see that she had shrunk into a ball. The 7 golden fox tails presented a spherical shield, tightly wrapping the body of the mystical silver fox. Zichiyun sighed for a moment and said, "The treasures of China are really enviable." Although there were many magic weapons in the Japanese cultivation world, their country was extremely short of materials, and most of the magic weapons were not high-grade. In the Ming dynasty, an ordinary military horse could immediately be sold at a sky-high price in the Warring States period of Japan. It could be said to be a horse that could not be bought with money. Among them, the favorite horse of the famous General Maeda Keiji in the Warring States period, Songfeng, was famous in the history of Japan. It was one of the most famous horses in the Warring States period. However, this ancient horse was only a medium-sized horse in the Ming dynasty of China. If the superior horse was taken to Japan for a walk, it would no longer be a horse, but a legendary divine beast. It could be seen from this that Japan was short of materials. In a country that was extremely short of materials, it was naturally impossible for there to be any good magic weapons refined. Therefore, the Japanese cultivation world mostly practiced the art of summoning ghosts, while the Chinese cultivation world often fought with magic weapons. It was fine if they didn't take out this kind of ancient magic weapon. The Japanese cultivators wouldn't think that the Chinese cultivation world was amazing. But just now they had been killed by the mystical silver fox without the power to fight back. In the blink of an eye, the mystical silver fox had been killed without the power to fight back. The reason was that the Chinese cultivation world had shown a celestial trapping sword. For a moment, the cultivators of various sects in Japan looked ahead with extremely complicated gazes. Some of them had evil thoughts and their eyes turned red with envy. At this time, Mao Yichang and Ding Nan also forgot their previous unhappiness. They stared at the mystical silver fox in the air with their eyes wide open. They couldn't help clenching their fists tightly, and their eyes didn't blink. They just wished that the immortal trapping sword would kill the mystical silver fox on the spot in the next second. Everyone saw that the mystical silver fox had been suppressed to the point that she had no power to fight back. But only Zhou Chang knew that the greatest power of the immortal trapping sword was that it could trap the opponent with continuous attacks, make the opponent lose his mind and make the wrong move. The immortal trapping sword itself was naturally very powerful, far better than ordinary magic weapons. But if it was used to deal with the mystical silver fox, it would be much worse. At this time the world was full of sword chi. Each sword chi was like a precious sword, rushing towards the mystical silver fox. However, none of the sword chi could pierce through the defensive shell formed by the 7 golden tails of the mystical silver fox. The 7 tails wrapped up all the angles of the mystical silver fox, leaving no gap, and it was not hurt at all. Although it gave the opponent a powerful attack, it was not life-threatening. Zhou Chang's original intention was to trap the mystical silver fox and buy more time for Wang Yuanshan's arrival. He didn't expect to kill the mystical silver fox with this immortal trapping sword. Although Zhou Chang himself was a master of thunder retribution and could be called a top cultivator in the Chinese cultivation world, compared with the mystical silver fox, he was still a long way behind. His face was as dark as water, and his eyes were fixed on the mystical silver fox in the violent sword chi. He was afraid that she would break free from the immortal trapping formation in the next second. Seeing this scene, Ding Nan suddenly thought of something and thought to herself, now that the mystical silver fox is trapped in this immortal killing formation, what will happen if I use the Hell Wuzhang to capture her soul? Will the mystical silver fox be killed by me? If I can kill the mystical silver fox, I'm afraid that I will become famous in the future. Who in the world will dare to look at me? The more she thought about it, the hotter her heart became. Her hand unconsciously reached into her sleeve. The moment her fingertips touched the ice-cold handle of the Hell Wuzhang, her fingers trembled. But then she firmly and forcefully gripped the Rui scepter. She clenched the Rui scepter firmly and firmly. As soon as she thought about it, she couldn't stop it anymore. All she thought about was how to make a name for herself and make people look at her. How could Zhou Chang have expected that this beautiful girl, who was as beautiful as a flower, would be so bold at this time that she dared to take the initiative to provoke the mystical silver fox? Although Mao Yichang had followed them on impulse before, after calming down, she positioned herself as a soy sauce. It was good for her to be a soy sauce at a close distance. She could avoid participating in the battle as much as possible. Otherwise, she would be killed in seconds when they met. How bad would that be? Therefore, Mao Yichang did not expect that the guy beside her would dare to take the initiative to attack. Without them noticing it, Ding Nan suddenly put one hand in her sleeve and shouted, "Mystical silver fox." Her shout was not very obvious in the roar of the overwhelming sword chi, but in an instant, a thick black mist rushed out of Ding Nan's sleeve and rushed toward the mystical silver fox like a torrent. Zhou Chang and Maui Chang were shocked at the same time. Their faces suddenly changed and they exclaimed in unison, "Hell Wuzhang?" As they spoke, their eyes were full of horror and fear. If Zhou Chang had the immortal trapping sword in his hand, Maui Chang would only be surprised, but she didn't think it was strange. Logically speaking, for a sect as powerful as the Chuanjin Dragon sect, it wasn't strange for its founding elder to have a sect-guarding artifact in his possession. Even the Linggong sect, which had been in decline, still had 3 powerful magical weapons. One of the 3 powerful magical weapons was the Bahuang and Liuha, one of the 5 great Taoist swords. Even the Linggong sect was like this, let alone the Chuanjin Dragon sect. But Ding Nan was different. What kind of sect was the Yin Yang sect? It could be said to be the least popular sect in the Chinese cultivation world. Ding Nan, who had become a monk halfway through her life, suddenly took out the Hell Wuzhang sword. This was really frightening. It was as if 2 cowboys did not like each other and decided to have a duel. One of them had just turned around to pull out his gun and was about to pull the trigger when he suddenly realized that the guy in front of him had turned into Iron Man with gun barrels sticking out from all over his body and pointing at him. This is too outrageous, isn't it? Maui Chang's mind buzzed and she unconsciously said in her heart, how could she have such a terrifying powerful magical weapon? Just now I actually wanted to fight with her one-on-one. Although Maui Chang was conceited, she would never be conceited enough to think that she could defeat an opponent who was at the same level as her and had the Hell Wuzhang. She was looking at Ding Nan in fear, but in the blink of an eye, the black mist rushed to the golden barrier of the mystical silver fox. The 7 tails of the mystical silver fox could resist most of the magic arts and magic treasures, but they could not resist the soul erosion of the Hell 5 feet. The mystical silver fox was hiding in the barrier and thinking about the countermeasures in front of her. Suddenly she saw a black mist pouncing on her through her barrier. In the blink of an eye, it pounced on her and turned into a few ferocious ghosts, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws at her. At this time, the mystical silver fox had no way to avoid it, so she could only bear it. Fortunately, her cultivation was too high. When she was invaded by this evil chi, she immediately felt that the blood in her body was almost frozen, and the jinqi in her body suddenly slowed down. The mystical silver fox was furious. Her blood-red eyes widened and she immediately wanted to rush out and kill people. But just as she was about to move, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind, and a sneer appeared at the corner of her mouth. At this time, the people on both sides of the mountain saw Ding Nan shout loudly, and a black smoke rushed straight to the mystical silver fox. Then, the 7 golden tails beside the mystical silver fox instantly drooped down, and there were countless flaws in her body. This time all the cultivators on both sides of the mountain were stunned. But soon they realized one thing with great excitement in their minds. The mystical silver fox's defense had been broken, and she had a flaw. Almost at the same time, countless magic arts and powerful magical weapons flew out of the mountains on both sides in an instant. Like a storm they rushed toward the mystical silver fox. At this time, the magic arts and powerful magical weapons on both sides were really saturated to an extremely terrifying extent. It was as if a tsunami that connected the sky and the earth had surged out from both sides at the same time, slapping toward the mystical silver fox. Zhou Chang didn't expect that at this moment, the mystical silver fox would be hit by Ding Nan's Hell 5 feet. He was stunned at first and then he was ecstatic. With a thought, he controlled the immortal trapping sword to stab the mystical silver fox. The flaw of the mystical silver fox only appeared for a moment, and soon she mobilized her jinqi again. Her 7 fox tails twisted crazily, blocking the countless magic arts and powerful magical weapons that were already close to her. Zhou Chang saw it clearly from the side. While the mystical silver fox was busy dealing with the countless powerful magical weapons and magic arts that had already approached her, he controlled the immortal trapping sword, which had shown its true body and watched covetously. At this time, Ding Nan happened to shout again, "Mystical silver fox." A thick, rolling black smoke swallowed the mystical silver fox in an instant. When the mystical silver fox broke free again, the immortal trapping sword controlled by Zhou Chang flashed with lightning and fiercely stabbed at the mystical silver fox's chest. Suddenly, with a puff, the mystical silver fox screamed, and her chest was immediately pierced through. For a moment, everyone was stunned. They could hardly believe their eyes. The devil who had once been invincible in the world and dominated the cultivation world of the Middle Sun had died just like that? At this time Ding Nan's mind was also buzzing, and then she was ecstatic. She couldn't help shouting loudly, "Dead, the mystical silver fox is dead, I killed the mystical silver fox." Chapter 851. As the mystical silver fox was hit by the sword, in an instant, Suye's killing stone scenic area was completely quiet. The magic, which had been overwhelming like a storm, suddenly disappeared, and the mystical silver fox disappeared. "You're almost there." As the immortal trapping sword had revealed its true form, the piercingly cold sword aura that pervaded everywhere had disappeared. At this time the surroundings were extremely quiet. Only the sound of the pouring rain and Ding Nan's ecstatic shouts reverberated between heaven and earth. Although the mystical silver fox was not directly killed by Ding Nan, her shout did not cause anyone to sneer or refute, because they all knew that if Ding Nan had not suddenly used such a sinister powerful magical weapon, the immortal trapping sword would not have been able to take advantage of the situation. For a moment, everyone looked at the field with their mouths agape. Their eyes were full of shock and doubt, but soon some people cheered loudly. Some cultivators who didn't believe that the mystical silver fox had died in such a way couldn't help but feel suspicious in their hearts amid the earth-shaking cheers. Only Zhou Chang's eyebrows were tightly furrowed. His cultivation was extremely high and he vaguely felt that something was wrong. How famous was the mystical silver fox? As the saying goes, there was no false reputation. How could she be killed so easily? Zhou Chang looked around and his two snow-white eyebrows were knitted tighter and tighter. His eyes were like lightning. He looked at the thick rain curtain and stared at the mystical silver fox. At this time, the mystical silver fox's body was still in the air. Her 7 fox tails were hanging low in the air, and she was no longer as wild as before. But as the thunderstorm fell, the 7 fox tails were motionless in the air. Suddenly Zhou Chang's eyes widened, and he let out a roar of extreme fear. "I've been tricked. This is an illusion." Illusions were not created by the Fox Zen sect, but it was the fox spirits of the Fox Zen sect who brought them to the highest level. As the strongest person in the Fox Zen sect for more than 1,000 years, the mystical silver fox had naturally cultivated her illusion skills to the level of perfection. Her illusion skills had already reached the stage of turning fake into real. Others knew that the 4 fairy killing swords were hopeless, so when they saw her being penetrated, they thought that she was dead for sure. Unexpectedly at this moment, the mystical silver fox took advantage of the other party's eagerness to win and Ding Nan's eagerness to seek fame. After Zhou Chang shouted, the figure of the mystical silver fox appeared in front of Ding Nan in an instant. Her face was ferocious and her blood-red eyes seemed to be burning. Her terrifying eyes stared at Ding Nan, and in an instant, Ding Nan felt that she could not move. Ding Nan's mind exploded, and a thought quickly flashed through her mind. "It's over, I'm dead." Her eyes widened as she watched the mystical silver fox's white hand stab at her chest, but she did not react at all. At this time, if it were a Jinshin master, it would be impossible for him to be unable to fight back, let alone be stared at by the mystical silver fox. However, although Ding Nan had quite a lot of adventures, her cultivation speed was too fast. Along the way, she had been opportunistic, and she had not encountered any hardships on the road of cultivation. When she was in the Zhuji phase, her Niden was not as hard as that of ordinary cultivators. Her resolve wasn't firm, just like Zhou Zhirua who had learned the 9 white bone claws. Although she could flaunt her might for a moment and could launch sneak attacks during a battle, causing those who didn't understand her to feel that she was abnormally vicious, but if she were to encounter a true expert in a duel, then she could only surrender and be thoroughly defeated. Mao Yichang, who was standing to one side, was also shocked by the sudden change. Although she had some friction with Ding Nan and was arrogant and conceited, she was kind after all. When she saw that the mystical silver fox was about to kill Ding Nan, she immediately pointed her fingers subconsciously. A bolt of lightning flashed in her sleeve and quickly stabbed at the mystical silver fox. The mystical silver fox was really a little afraid of the Hell Wuzhang in Ding Nan's hand. She was even more vigilant than she was about the immortal trapping sword. Therefore, she didn't take Mao Yichang seriously at all. Instead, she moved faster. The 7 golden tails behind her rolled up and immediately slapped at Mao Yichang like a raging wave. With a bang, she flew backward and disappeared in an instant. At this time, Ding Nan was waiting for death with her eyes wide open. Suddenly, she saw Zhou Chang appear in front of the mystical silver fox in the blink of an eye. He held a talisman in his hand and slapped it at the mystical silver fox's head. The Maoshan sect was a famous talisman sect of Chinese Taoism. This talisman was made by Zhou Chang, and its power was no less than that of the celestial master talisman. If it hit, the mystical silver fox's body would immediately be blown into powder. So, as Zhou Chang counterattacked the mystical silver fox, he pushed Ding Nan with the other hand and pushed her far away in an instant. He shouted, "Let's go." Like Zhang Zhishuan, Zhou Chang had experienced all kinds of disasters in the Chinese cultivation world. He was heartbroken by the constant loss of masters in the Chinese cultivation world. At this time when he saw Mao Yichang and Ding Nan, he thought that they were young and promising. In time they would definitely be brilliant figures in the Chinese cultivation world. He was a person who loved talents very much. He didn't want to see Ding Nan die here like this, so he rushed forward to save her regardless of his own safety. He was old and experienced and he was an expert in fighting. At the moment of saving people, he could counterattack and threaten the mystical silver fox. Everyone admired him secretly when they saw this kind of method. But unfortunately the opponent he met was the mystical silver fox. The mystical silver fox's attack suddenly failed. She was furious. She didn't even look at the talisman that Zhou Chang had found for her. She waved her hand and slapped Zhou Chang with a backhand. At the same time, the golden fox tail behind her rolled up and wrapped Zhou Chang's arm in it, like countless vines wrapping around it. Zhou Chang was shocked. He reacted very quickly. With a flick of his 5 fingers, he flicked the talisman towards the mystical silver fox. The two of them were very close to each other, almost fighting close to each other. This move was as fast as lightning and extremely difficult to guard against. However, the mystical silver fox was the horn that dominated the world with speed. Her figure flashed in an instant and appeared behind Zhou Chang in an instant. At this time, Zhou Chang's whole body was cold, and a trace of despair flashed through his mind. His magic treasure, the immortal trapping sword, also felt that he was in danger. It immediately rushed to save its master and pounced on the mystical silver fox like crazy. Because Zhou Chang was controlled by the mystical silver fox, the immortal trapping sword could not use the immortal trapping formation. It surrounded the mystical silver fox with endless attacks like water. It could only show its real body and stab at the mystical silver fox's back. However, the mystical silver fox was not surprised. Instead, she was happy. She had been waiting for this moment. The rest of the golden fox tails behind the mystical silver fox instantly opened. The golden silk on the fox tail was like a dense spider web, firmly covering the immortal trapping sword. Although the sword, one of the 4 immortal killing swords, was powerful and cut off a lot of fox silk at the beginning, there were more and more golden fox silk around it. The immortal trapping sword was like an insect falling on a spider web. The more it struggled, the tighter it was. The magic treasure was psychic. Although it did not have the wisdom of human beings, it also knew that the crisis was approaching it step by step. At this time, more and more golden fox silk was entangled, and its body was almost invisible. The immortal trapping sword struggled crazily, but the mystical silver fox did not give it a chance to escape. She laughed grimly, curled her tail and twisted all the golden fox silk. With a crisp sound, the immortal trapping sword was twisted into several pieces. All of a sudden, the immortal trapping sword no longer struggled. All the spiritual chi in its body was drained, and it fell from the air like a piece of scrap metal. 3 of the 4 immortal killing swords, which were once famous in the world, had been lost. Only the immortal trapping sword was still silently passed down in the world. However, in this battle against the mystical silver fox, the last 4 immortal killing swords were finally completely destroyed and disappeared from the world. From then on, the 4 immortal killing swords were extinct and completely became a legend, no longer existing. Zhou Chang watched helplessly as the immortal trapping sword was destroyed in front of him. His whole body trembled and his heart ached like a knife. In an instant, he remembered that when he was still a child, his master had solemnly passed on this sword to him. At that time, the picture flashed in front of Zhou Chang's eyes like a lantern. When the last picture was fixed, it was the ferocious face of the mystical silver fox and a white palm that was growing rapidly in front of him. With a puff sound, the mystical silver fox slapped Zhou Chang's head with her palm. In an instant, his brain was smashed and his body and soul were destroyed. The sound was not loud at all, and it was drowned out by the heavy rain around them. However, it was as if a heavy drum had been beaten in everyone's heart. All of this happened too fast, so fast that people could not see it and could not come back to their senses. At this time, the illusion set up by the mystical silver fox slowly disappeared in mid-air. On the other side, Zhou Cheng's body had already fallen quickly from mid-air, like a broken sack. From ecstasy to fear, such a roller coaster change made everyone desperate. The morale of the Japanese cultivation world had completely fallen to the bottom, and it could no longer be inspired by Ise Xinguang and the others. The cultivators of various sects in China were also shocked and did not know what to do. After losing Zhou Chang, although there were also good cultivators among the cultivators of various sects, when there was no group of dragons and their morale was low, where should they go? Should they fight or flee? At this time, Ding Nan also stopped in midair like a walking corpse. She was so stunned that she could not come back to her senses. Her mind was buzzing with a thought: I failed? I failed. I killed Senior Zhou. Although Ding Nan's personality was extreme, she still had a kind side in her heart. When she saw such a respected senior like Zhou Chang, she naturally admired him. Moreover, Zhou Chang affirmed her in front of everyone, approved of her and praised her, which made her have a strong affection and admiration for Zhou Chang. However, such a veteran of the Chinese cultivation world had lost his life because of his own arrogance. At this moment, Ding Nan was really regretful. She knew that in the next second, the mystical silver fox would definitely come to kill her again, and at this time, there would be no one to save her. She was dead. Ding Nan's heart was as cold as ash. She gritted her teeth and raised her hand to slap the top of her head. As soon as she moved her hand, it was suddenly held by someone. A soft voice came over: "What's the matter? You have to commit suicide?" At this time, Ding Nan's cultivation was also quite high. It was impossible for others to appear beside her without noticing and grab her arm so easily, even if she was extremely absent-minded. But at this time, Ding Nan suddenly felt that there was someone beside her. She turned her head in shock and saw a handsome, elegant middle-aged man standing beside her. This man had an indescribable bearing. His eyes were gentle and wise, as if he could see through everything at a glance. It seemed that his cultivation was even higher than Zhou Chang's. The terrifying eyes of the mystical silver fox could make people despair and have the will to die. However, the man in front of her looked at her gently. The fear and the thought of death in Ding Nan's heart suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if the chill had been swept away by the wind. Her heart seemed to be warm and her whole body was full of vitality and strength. Ding Nan was shocked and a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Who is this person? Is there such a powerful person in the world? Chapter 852. The person in front of Ding Nan was none other than Wang Yuanshan, who had arrived late. After he learned from Tachibana Wakako that the mystical silver fox had already attacked, he rushed here. He also knew that if he didn't speed up, the people on Mount Shuya would all die. At that time he wouldn't be able to deal with the mystical silver fox alone. Almost there, and even if they could deal with it, the vitality of the Chinese cultivation world would be severely damaged. For a moment Wang Yuanshan didn't care so much. He suddenly sped up. After he left the land of China, he stepped on the floodwaters and stepped on the sea. Although he was walking on the sea, he was much faster than Tachibana Wakako and Abe, who were flying. In the beginning, Abe had the intention to compete with Wang Yuanshan. Although he knew that his cultivation was far inferior to Wang Yuanshan's, but the Chinese in front of him was walking on the sea. Could it be that his flying speed was inferior to his walking speed? As a result, along the way he followed behind Wang Yuanshan and ate dust all the way. He almost lost half of his life, but he still couldn't catch up. When they reached the ground of Japan, he sighed in amazement and was shocked in his heart. This Chinese man's cultivation is really unfathomable and terrifying. The Japanese cultivators did not build the foundation and did not cultivate their lives. Therefore they relied on their explosive power to fight. Few people could have a strong endurance. Wang Yuanshan had already reached the Jinshin realm more than 10 years ago. During the 10 years of imprisonment he was so bored that he could only cultivate. Otherwise he had nothing else to do. His cultivation had long since reached an unimaginable level, far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Wang Yuanshan rushed all the way, and the speed of the lightning above his head suddenly increased. Its power was several times stronger than before. Fortunately, there were thunderstorms everywhere he went these days. The weather forecast in Japan was just like a joke. Rain all over Japan. With the cover of the thunderstorm, the heavenly lightning didn't seem too abrupt. Otherwise, in the middle of the day where there were no clouds for tens of thousands of li, if two dense dark clouds suddenly floated over with two lightning whirlpools, who wouldn't be dumbfounded upon seeing this? Even ordinary people could find something wrong. How could the mystical silver fox not find it? Under the cover of the thunderstorm, Wang Yuanshan finally felt relieved. He quickly ran towards Suyi. When he reached his destination, he saw a beautiful woman with a graceful figure floating in the air. Her face was full of sorrow and fear, ready to commit suicide. Without saying a word, his figure flashed, and he immediately went forward to stop him. Ding Nan's heart was filled with grief and self-reproach, and she wanted to die. She turned her head to look at Wang Yuanshan, only to see that he was travel-worn, his hair disheveled, but his eyes were sharp and clear. "You almost there?" When Wang Yuanshan opened his mouth, Ding Nan immediately remembered that this was the #1 expert in the world, Wang Yuanshan, who had intimidated the Shantian sect on the side peak of Mount Longhu. Seeing that the top expert in the Chinese cultivation world had finally arrived, Ding Nan's heart was lifted for no reason. She quickly told Wang Yuanshan about the situation on the field. Only then did Wang Yuanshan know that there had been a fierce battle before. The Japanese cultivation world had suffered heavy casualties, and corpses were everywhere. Zhou Chang, a veteran of the Chinese cultivation world, had died on the spot. Although there were fewer casualties in the Chinese cultivation world, Zhou Chang's death and the destruction of the immortal trapping sword had not only caused great losses to the Chuanjian dragon sect, but also caused irreparable losses to the Chinese cultivation world. Wang Yuanshan was stunned when he heard this. Then he sighed softly and said, "Senior Zhou is really a role model for our generation." Ding Nan secretly bit her lip. Her heart skipped a beat and she seemed to have thought of something. She couldn't help but retract her hand into her sleeve. She held the Hell Wuzhang sword tightly and refused to let go. She was secretly nervous. Although she was remorseful and blamed herself in her heart, she was absolutely unwilling to use such a sinister artifact. Wang Yuanshan glanced at her, and his deep eyes seemed to see through her mind. He smiled slightly and didn't say anything. He just said softly, "There are only evil people in the world, and there are no evil powerful magical weapons. Please remember." Ding Nan's heart trembled and she slowly relaxed. Just as she was about to speak, she saw a flash in front of her eyes. The mystical silver fox had already appeared in front of her. The 7 golden fox tails were like a golden waterfall, almost covering half of the sky. They were extremely dazzling and magnificent. Ding Nan's heart suddenly tightened. She gritted her teeth and looked at the mystical silver fox. She didn't dare to say another word, for fear that the other party would take advantage of her as soon as she opened her mouth. The shadow that the mystical silver fox had left on her before was too strong. At this time, Wang Yuanshan was known as the best in the Chinese cultivation world. He was even more famous than Li Jiandong. Although he had been a famous master for a long time, the mystical silver fox had been sealed for 900 years. How could she know who he was? The mystical silver fox saw Wang Yuanshan at a glance. She only looked at him a little and said impatiently, "Get out of the way or I'll kill you." Wang Yuanshan smiled slightly and said, "Mystical silver fox, will you not kill me if I give way or not?" The mystical silver fox had won a series of battles. She had killed Zhou Chang and destroyed the immortal trapping sword. She was at the peak of her momentum. How could she take this unknown soldier in front of her seriously? When she saw that the other party had retorted with a light sentence, she was immediately furious. A golden fox tail behind her swung fiercely, like a spear or a halberd, and stabbed at Wang Yuanshan. At this time, Tachibana Wakako and Abe arrived. The two of them knew that Wang Yuanshan was powerful, but they didn't know how powerful he was. Especially as Japanese, they were very clear about the level of most of the cultivators who had died in the battle in the Japanese cultivation world. In front of the mystical silver fox and her 7 golden fox tails, these people had no power to fight back and were at the mercy of others. At this time, Wang Yuanshan finally met the mystical silver fox, which immediately made them so nervous that they cried out loudly. One of them blurted out in Japanese and the other blurted out in Chinese, "Be careful." Seeing that the mystical silver fox was coming at him aggressively, Wang Yuanshan was not in a hurry. He put his palms in front of him as if they were sealed. In an instant, a visible yin-yang 8 trigrams appeared in front of him. As soon as he crossed his palms, the yin-yang 8 trigrams slowly began to circulate. Although it looked heavy and slow, it was extremely powerful. The mystical silver fox's golden fox tail suddenly hit the 8 trigrams, and the surrounding air suddenly shook. After the 8 trigrams rippled for a while, a huge force bounced back, shaking the invincible golden fox tail of the mystical silver fox back. The mystical silver fox was shocked. Then she looked at Wang Yuanshan seriously and shouted with sharp eyes, "Who are you?" When Wang Yuanshan separated his hands again, the yin-yang 8 trigrams in front of him suddenly disappeared. He smiled and said, "Jingyi School Linggong Sect Wang Yuanshan." In the Song, Yuan, Ming and Qing dynasties, Jingyi School was an earth-shattering sect of cultivation. It was the leader of Taoism in the Chinese cultivation world. However, the mystical silver fox was from the Tang dynasty and was driven to Japan during the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. The Jingyi school was originally called the 5 Pecks of Rice sect. Later it was changed to the Celestial Master Taoism during the Wei, Jin and Northern and Southern dynasties. After the Sui and Tang dynasties, it was not called the Jingyi school. It was not until the mystical silver fox fled from China that the Jingyi school was called the Dragon Tiger sect. The mystical silver fox then lurked around the Emperor of the Bird Feather in Japan for a period of time. This period corresponded to the period of Emperor Huizong of the Song dynasty. At this time, Zhang Jixin, the 30th generation celestial master of the Jingyi school, was very favored by Emperor Huizong of the Song dynasty. As a result, the Shangqing Temple of the ancestral court of Mount Longhu was upgraded to the Shangqing Jingyi Palace. Since then, the Jianghu and political status of the Jingyi school had reached the peak. From then on, the name of the Dragon Tiger sect was no longer mentioned. The world only knew the Jingyi school, and few people mentioned the Celestial Master Taoism and the Dragon Tiger sect. Therefore it could be said that in the Song dynasty, the name of the Jingyi school slowly spread. Although the mystical silver fox was also a knowledgeable cultivator, when she fled to Japan, what happened to China? How could she, a person who lived deep in the inner palace, know? If it was the 5 Pecks of Rice sect, the Celestial Master Taoism and the Dragon Tiger sect, then she naturally knew them. Moreover, in the Tang dynasty, politics, culture, religion and economy had all flourished to a peak. At this time, the Tang dynasty had all kinds of rivers running into the sea, and all kinds of sects were flourishing. At this time, the Dragon Tiger sect was far from reaching the point of unifying the world. It could only be regarded as a relatively famous sect in the cultivation world, far less famous than in the Song, Yuan and Ming dynasties. The mystical silver fox was a bit like the Taoyuan people in the peach blossom origin. She didn't know about the Han dynasty but about the Wei and Jin dynasties. She didn't even know about the Jingyi school, let alone the Linggong sect. Moreover, although Wang Yuanshan had been famous for a long time, the mystical silver fox had been sealed for 900 years. After her memory was completely awakened, she had been thinking about taking revenge on the cultivation world of China and Japan. How could she care about the current situation of the cultivation world, let alone Wang Yuanshan? Therefore Wang Yuanshan's name was deafening to others. Many cultivators in the distance heard Wang Yuanshan's voice from afar, but as soon as he opened his mouth, his voice was calm and elegant, as if he was standing in front of them and speaking softly. They all looked serious. Even if they didn't know Wang Yuanshan's name, they knew that this person must be a great master. Those who knew of his name exclaimed softly, "Ah, that's China's #1 expert." Before, Zhou Chang and his immortal trapping sword had already shocked the cultivators of all sects in Japan. At this time, in the face of danger, no one dared to look down on the Chinese cultivators. At this time, when they heard the title of the #1 master in China, they immediately became respectful and looked at Wang Yuanshan with a strange look. At this time, the mystical silver fox saw him say 3 short sentences. 9 words, but she didn't know any of them. What was the Jingyi school? I don't know. What was the Linggong sect? I've never heard of it. Who was Wang Yuanshan? Who knew? Wang Yuanshan was so famous, but in the eyes of the mystical silver fox, he was just a nobody. The mystical silver fox couldn't help but look down on him. However, Wang Yuanshan blocked her attack with his bare hands, which made her pay attention to Wang Yuanshan. The mystical silver fox sneered and said, "It seems that I have been sleeping for 900 years. There are really talented people in every generation." The mystical silver fox had a disease. She was a beauty at the level of a disaster, so she had a very high standard. She liked handsome men very much, and she preferred beautiful men with outstanding temperament. In the past, Huifa could make her fall in love with him, not only because he had saved her life, but also because Huifa was handsome and had an extraordinary bearing. Although she was full of killing at this time and was full of hostility, as the saying goes, it is easy to change mountains and rivers. In the past, the cultivators of various sects in Japan, such as Yoshida Shinmura, Ryuichi Yamazaki, and Masao Yoshikawa, were all strange uncles and strange uncles. Not only were they ugly and strange, but they were also dressed strangely. Although Ise Shunlight, Kaisai Hikaryuni, and the others did not look like them, they could not be associated with the word handsome and beautiful, even if they had plastic surgery 800 times. The mystical silver fox hated the cultivators of various sects in Japan to the bone. When she saw these guys who were not beautiful, she naturally killed them. Zhou Chang was old and shrewd, so he was not a handsome guy. He was killed by the mystical silver fox on the spot without saying a word. But at this time, although Wang Yuanshan was also old, he looked quite young. He was only about 30 or 40 years old, which was the golden age of a man's most attractive. He could be called an old man is called a saint. Wang Yuanshan was not only handsome, but also had an ethereal and elegant aura. Anyone who saw him would have a good impression of him. The mystical silver fox saw that there was no murderous aura around him, and his appearance was far different from that of the others before. It would be outrageous for her to have a good impression of Wang Yuanshan. But the situation in front of her was like a man who was killing crazily and suddenly saw a beautiful woman appear in front of him. His first reaction must be to be stunned for a moment, instead of immediately brandishing his knife to cut her. As the saying goes, everyone loves beauty. Although the mystical silver fox was still angry in her heart, her killing intent had inevitably weakened a lot. Wang Yuanshan saw her change and was not ready to expose her contempt. He said with a smile, "Mystical silver fox, I see that you are barehanded, and I am also barehanded. You don't have a powerful magical weapon on you, and I don't have a powerful magical weapon with me. Why don't we have a fair fight?" When the mystical silver fox heard this, she was very surprised. She had always been fighting with a group of people alone since she became famous. She had almost never encountered a situation where she fought alone. It was not that she didn't want to, but that her opponents didn't dare to. The mystical silver fox was surprised. She couldn't help but raise her head and laugh. "Well, in the past 1,000 years, you are the first person who dares to fight with me alone. For this reason I will let you win. You can draw the Tao." Wang Yuanshan smiled slightly. He knew that the mystical silver fox had fallen into the trap, and his plan had succeeded more than half. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.